Chapter 936. Realm, Heavenly Palace. Ling Xiao descended from the sky and looked at the moon of Xianyuan and the others. Mother, I've returned to the Ling people. Xiao, how was it? Did the Ling people acknowledge your identity? Xianyuan Yu's face carried a touch of concern, and at the same time, a trace of loneliness. Ling Xiao's return meant that they would have to part ways. Although Ling Xiao had the Ling people's protection and had a high status in the Azure world, the moon of Xianyuan felt sad when she thought about how they would be apart in the future. Mother, don't worry. Everything is under my control. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. When he saw Su Yan, Bai Jishi, Feng Rouge, and the others' expectant expressions, he immediately smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll take you to travel around the Azure world later." "Brother, is there anything I can do?" Only Bai Ling looked calm, but her eyes were full of love for Ling Xiao. Ever since she merged with the heavenly wheel elixir ocean, her cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Now that Ling Xiao had just ascended to the upper realm, he naturally needed to reorganize his forces. She cultivated the killing Tao, so hiding in the dark would be more helpful to Ling Xiao. Therefore, she had never dreamed of standing beside Ling Xiao. She only wanted to quietly be his shadow. No matter where her brother went, she would always be there to protect him in the dark. Invincible and invincible. No hurry. Let's wait for Double Shadow to find out more about the distribution of forces in the Azure world before we make plans. Ling Xiao smiled gently. Although the Ling people were under his control now, they were a demonic lord. However, this faction was the inheritance of a demon lord. It was impossible for there to be a person with providence in the clan. But these people in front of him all had providence and had their own opportunities. In other words, although the Ling people were his support in the Azure Sky world, if he wanted to fight against the Immortals, the ones who could stand by his side in the end were still Phoenix Rouge, Bai Ling, and the others. Let's go. I'll show you guys the Azure Ling people. With a thought, Ling Xiao and the others appeared in the divine palace of Ling people. Ning Bai Jishi, and Hua Hua were shocked, and they exclaimed again and again. On the other hand, Han Qingqiu, Phoenix Rouge, Lin Meng, Ziyan, and the others were much more steady. However, there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. Let's go. There's no need to be so formal here. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and walked out of the hall first. Behind him, the other women all had happy expressions. However, Ziyan knew the most about the Taigu Ling people, and she was also the one who feared them the most. For the whole day, Ling Xiao and the others wandered around the god battlefield, enjoying the scenery. However, this peace was the beginning of another farewell to the others. There were countless geniuses in the Azure Sky upper realm. When would there be a day when this path would stop? When night fell, Ling Xiao and the others returned to the main hall. 13th Ancestor Ling and the 9 elders of the Ling people had been waiting for a long time. However, when they saw the women beside Ling Xiao, the Ling people's experts were surprised. They weren't surprised by their young master's affection. It was just that these women were all peerless and had Tao intent. They were all rare geniuses in the world. 13th Ancestor, I wonder if there are any experts in my clan who are accepting disciples? I accept. Just as Ling Xiao's voice fell, an ancient and terrifying aura suddenly shot up from the depths of the ancestral land. Suddenly, a thunderous roar came from the sky. Immediately, a rough-looking and sturdy old man stepped down from the sky and landed in front of Ning. His face that was covered in stubble was actually brimming with a wisp of unconcealed joy. Ha! I never imagined that this old man would actually be able to see such a natural talent in body refinement in my lifetime. Girl, are you willing to be my disciple? I only want my brother, not my master. Ning took a few steps back in fear and stood beside Ling Xiao. Her eyes were filled with shyness. Her personality was the complete opposite of Bai Jishi's. Bai Jishi was fearless. Even when her cultivation was only at the Paong realm, she was still arrogant and unyielding. Ning was the opposite. Even though her talent was ancient and her combat strength was heaven-defying, she still had the temperament of a young girl and was timid. Of course, their personalities were closely related to the environment they grew up in. Baijishi had been pampered by the demon emperors and demon kings of the Northern Territory since she was young. Ning-er's background was quite pitiful, so she was destined to have a slightly cowardly personality. It is this old man who has been rude. Greetings, young master. The old man was dressed in sackcloth and bowed respectfully toward Ling Xiao. 11th ancestor. Behind Ling Xiao, a group of Ling people elders were stunned. Obviously, they did not expect the ancestor of the Ling people to suddenly appear today. So it's the 11th ancestor. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. He saw that this person's aura was at its peak, and there was a faint sea of blood above his head. It was obvious how strong his physical strength was. Was he another heavenly supreme? Young master, I see that this girl's chi and blood are vigorous, and her divine body is naturally formed. She is a top body refining cultivator. If you can let her cultivate with me, I will definitely help her step into the venerable realm in less than 3 years. Ling Shi's name was Ling Shanhai. He was known as the strongest body refining cultivator in the Azure world. He was not inferior to the Demon Clan Supremes. However, this person had been in seclusion for a long time, and even Ling Xiao did not appear in the upper realm. However, he was shocked by Ning-er's talent and wanted to take her in as a disciple. Ning-er, you can cultivate with the 11th ancestor. Don't worry, if you want to return to the domain, you can come back anytime. Ling Xiao smiled, and Ning-er's little face immediately showed a hint of reluctance. Oh! Ha 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 ha, girl, don't worry. You will soon be able to crush this generation of Azure World. When that time comes, I will not stop you from going anywhere. Ling Shi laughed and bowed to Ling Xiao again. Then, he took Ning-er and went into the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land. Young master, I know of an ancestor who has just woken up from his seclusion. This female ancestor is proficient in both the Tao of alchemy and the Tao of sword refining. She is very strong. Ling Yuanqing shook his head and smiled bitterly. The 11th ancestor was boorish and did not stick to one style, but his strength was far above his. He just did not know what kind of disciple he would be able to teach given his character. Tao of alchemy and the Tao of sword refining? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. Qingqiu, you can cultivate with this ancestor. Yes, young master. Although there was reluctance in Han Qingqiu's eyes, she understood that strength was the foundation of following the young master. All right. The few of you, follow the ancestor and cultivate well. Everyone else, do not slack off. Ling Xiao said indifferently. Then, he led Baijishi and the others to the border of the realm of gods. Although the girls' talents were heaven-defying, their cultivation methods were all from the Xingzhou continent. In the Azure world, they had no power to speak of. With the personal guidance of the Ling people's ancestors, whether it was Han Qingqiu or Ning-er, their cultivation and battle strength would definitely improve. As for Su Yan, Baijishi, Phoenix Rouge, and the others, Ling Xiao would naturally find the most suitable path for them. Although there was an endless amount of spirit chi and fortune in the realm of gods, for those with heaven's mandate, life and death was the fastest way to reach the top. Stop! But, just as Ling Xiao's figure was about to disappear, another figure appeared in the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land. At the same time, a cold shout resounded through the world. A graceful figure in a purple robe slowly walked over from the horizon. Her celestial appearance was peerless, and even her temperament was extremely domineering. Chapter 937. Ling Xiao frowned, and there seemed to be Taoist rhymes circulating in his palm. Although he didn't believe that anyone would dare to attack him in the Ling people's temple, it was obvious that this woman didn't come with good intentions. Her purple robe fluttered in the wind, and she looked like a fairy. Her skin was fair and translucent, and even her hair was shining with divine light. Especially her eyes, which were actually a faint purple color. They were strange, but there was also an inexplicable sense of vicissitudes in them. There was a layer of dense divine light around her, which blocked the heavenly Tao's aura and contained a wisp of ancient intent. Ouch! But, just as Ling Xiao was secretly guessing the woman's identity, he saw her suddenly tremble and fall from the sky in an unbelievable posture, crashing into Ling Xiao's arms. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes and took a few steps back. Then, he hid to the side as the woman looked embarrassed and angry. Humph, mas. Ahem, young master, you're still as cold and heartless as ever. The purple-robed woman snorted, but she didn't hide the trace of joy in her eyes. She stood in front of Ling Xiao just like that, her pair of purple eyes staring straight at him, a bright and beautiful smile at the corner of her mouth. I've been waiting for you for so long. Who are you? Ling Xiao looked indifferent, but he already had a guess in his heart. He understood many things from the vicissitudes in the woman's eyes. The primordial sky demon was domineering and unparalleled. How could such a man not have admirers around him? Since this woman was among the Ling people, she must be one of the sky demon's former subordinates that Zhong Yu mentioned. Young master, you really don't remember me? I'm so sad. I've been waiting for you to come back for the past 190,000 years. The purple-robed woman's face was sad, and her eyes were filled with tears. She looked delicate and sad. Ninth ancestor, be careful with your words. Ling Yuanqing's expression changed, and he hurriedly reminded her. What ninth ancestor? Your whole family is made up of ninth ancestors. Am I that old? Call me Miss Dai from now on. The purple-robed woman glared fiercely at Ling Yuanqing as she spoke in an ice-cold tone. Ling Xiao could smell a refreshing fragrance on her body. At the same time, the Wind Dao Law and Dream Dao Law on her body were terrifying as well. Her strength was clearly above that of the 11th ancestor, Ling Xiao. At this moment, Ling Xiao was a little suspicious. Could the division of the Ling people's patriarchs be based on strength? Is there anything else? If you don't have anything else, then move aside. Of course, no matter who this woman was, she posed no threat to Ling Xiao. Moreover, this kind of unreasonable character was really not in line with Ling Xiao's taste. Master, do you really not remember me? A wisp of disappointment finally flickered in the violet-robed woman's eyes when she heard this, and a strand of sorrow seemed to flow from her bones. Who are you? Demonic Feather King, Mystic Butterfly greets Master. At this moment, there were only a few elders of the Ling people's direct bloodline and Bai Zhishi and the other girls in this area. Thus, this Sky Demon Palace expert did not conceal her identity at all. As expected, an old subordinate of the Sky Demon. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. He did not expect that this seemingly crazy and beautiful woman was also an ancient figure, and a demon king at that. Master, did you just say that you want to find a master for these girls? Although I, Mystic Butterfly, am not the strongest person of the Ling people, in terms of comprehension of the Great Tao, I do not lose to anyone. You will follow me and cultivate in the future. Mystic Butterfly stretched out her hand and pointed at Bai Zhishi, Hua, and Ziyan. Hearing this, the three girls' pretty faces immediately revealed a trace of distress. Especially Bai Zhishi, who hid behind Ling Xiao with a face full of fear, her little head shaking like a rattle drum. I don't want to cultivate with this crazy woman. Sir, please don't make me go with her. However, at this moment, a trace of a smile appeared in Ling Zhao's eyes. Whether it was Hua or Bai Zhishi, they had lazy personalities. If they were not strolling around in the realms, they would be gluttonous. As for this Feather King, she most likely had some feelings for the Sky Demon and was somewhat jealous of Hua and the others. However, she was a servant and did not dare to act recklessly. Thus, Hua Hua and Bai Jishi would only suffer physical pain, but their lives would not be in danger. Giving the 2 girls to her would be a good way to supervise her cultivation. Hua Hua and Jishi can cultivate with this 9th ancestor. Ziyen does not need to. Ling Xiao said indifferently. Ziyen immediately transformed into her original form and threw herself into Ling Xiao's arms, as if she was afraid that he would change his mind. Why? Bai Jishi frowned, clearly unwilling. However, when she saw Ling Xiao's expression, she immediately lost her temper and did not say anything. She only pouted and looked like she was about to cry. You want to become the young master's woman? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others with such strength? Don't worry, young master. I will definitely discipline them strictly. Bewitching Butterfly snorted coldly. Meanwhile, Ling Xiao had already disappeared into the distance with Ziyen in his arms. Master, this time I will let Bewitching Butterfly accompany you. In a battle of immortals. Bewitching Butterfly's expression immediately turned cold as she looked at the figure in the darkness. Above her head, a pair of black wings silently spread out, enveloping the sky and covering the moon and stars, emanating endless demonic intent. The deity battle domain, the border. Ling Songming and several Ling people's elders had been waiting for a long time. They only bowed when Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky. Greetings, young master. You are the Xianyuan people. Do not act recklessly, Ling Xiao said indifferently. With a thought, the moon of Xianyuan, Mengyuan, and Lin Meng appeared before everyone. However, when the moon of Xianyuan saw Ling Songming, who was at the front of the crowd, a complicated look flickered in her eyes. Greetings, Lord of the Ling people. Long time no see you er. In the end, although Ling Xiao didn't have any feelings for Ling Songming, the moon of Xianyuan was his daughter-in-law. Back then, her marriage with Ling Tianlin had been arranged by Ling Songming. No matter how much resentment the moon of Xianyuan felt, she still maintained some poise at this moment. Mother, remember to send me a message if there's anything. Menger can stay by my side. I will find a good place for her. Ling Xiao now had a sufficient understanding of the factions in the Azure Sky world. He did see an ancient sect in Zhuge Yuntian's memories. It was called the Sacred Fire Divine Sect. It was also a large sect in the Azure Sky world, and was extremely powerful. As for the successor of this sect, Ling Xiao had some guesses. This person cultivated the Tao of Pill Fire. It was said that he had fused with a heaven and earth spirit fire when he was in the God Dharch realm. His talent was extraordinary and peerless, which was why he was elected as the young master of a sect. However, it was said that he had suffered from a hidden injury when he fused with the heaven and earth spirit fire, and often suffered from a backlash. If Ling Xiao's guess was right, this young master of the Sacred Fire Divine Sect was most likely cultivating the blazing scripture passed down by Elder Ling. As for the backlash from the heaven and earth spirit fire, it was probably related to the incomplete blazing scripture he cultivated. Given Elder Ling's talent, how could he not have a backup plan even if he had been plotted against by a disciple and died? Logically speaking, this young master of the Sacred Fire Divine Sect should be a small climax for Ling Xiao after he ascended to the upper realm. However, Ling Xiao now planned to avenge Elder Ling and help the Sacred Fire Divine Sect find a new young master at the same time. After all, the grace of a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Since Elder Ling generously gave the blazing scripture to me, how can I forget this kindness? I, Ling Xiao, am righteous and kind. The world should take me as an example. F***CK. Chapter 938. This, alright. The moon of Xianyuan was silent for a long time before nodding. She naturally had the deepest feelings for Lin Meng among all the women by Ling Xiao's side. However, in the end, the moon of Xianyuan saw these women as not only Ling Xiao's concubines but also the power he controlled. Ling Xiao most likely had his reasons for keeping Lin Meng, so she could not say much. Thank you, Clan Master. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. He watched Ling Songming, the moon of Xianyuan, and the others disappear into the night before waving his hand to summon Xiao Tong out of the realm. My lord? This place is wow. What dense spirit energy! Could this be the Azure Sky world? Xiao Tong's expression was one of shock and exaggeration. Ling Xiao glanced at him indifferently and said calmly, "You haven't returned for 300 years. I believe you miss your family and friends. Go." My lord, you mean? Xiao Tong's fat face trembled. Then, as if thinking of something, he straightened his back and said solemnly, "Ha ha, my lord must be joking. How can family and family be more important than my duty? My duty now is to protect my lord and accompany my lord in conquering the world. How could I dare to be greedy for personal matters before my wish is fulfilled?" You're really not going back? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. My lord, are you really willing to let me return? Xiao Tong's eyes trembled as he probed. Keep this voice transmission talisman well. If you need anything, send me a voice transmission at any time. Ling Xiao casually tossed a voice transmission talisman to Xiao Tong and turned to head into the depths of the divine battle domain. Xiao Bo, on the other hand, stared blankly at the departing figure. He was stunned for a long time before tears suddenly appeared in his eyes. He did not have deep feelings for the Xiao clan. However, he still had a younger sister in the clan. He wondered how she had been for the past 300 years. My lord, when this humble Xiao returns home to visit my younger sister, I will immediately return to repay your kindness. As soon as he finished speaking, a wisp of a sincere expression appeared on Xiao Po's face for the first time, and he bowed deeply towards Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao just waved his hand and didn't even turn his head. Desolate had already submitted and would definitely not betray him. Now that he had returned to the Desolate clan, according to the plot, he would most likely have to go through some hardship. At that time, Ling Xiao's role would be the 100,000 divine soldiers that would descend from the heavens to help him control the Xiao clan. In this way, the Yi and Xiao clans had become Ling Xiao's arms. Ling Xiao finally had his own foundation in the Azure Sky world. With all the chess pieces in place, the game was about to unfold. However, this time, Ling Xiao's opponent was no longer Yi Luoyun alone. Instead, it was countless experts from the ancient times who were even more terrifying than him. For example, the Realm Master who had gone missing. His shrewdness and boldness were enough to make Ling Xiao wary. In order to truly conquer this realm, Ling Xiao had to do something different from what he had done in the lower realm. He had to suppress the four realms and then use the power of the four realms to destroy the ruler of this realm. This was the Azure Sky world. There were tens of thousands of galaxies and countless forces. Even if Ling people were powerful, it was still wishful thinking for him to fight against tens of thousands of sects and regions by himself. Therefore, Ling Xiao decided to change his strategy this time. He wanted to personally stir up chaos in this world and then become the only savior of the world. Young master, they've all left. It's suddenly a little lonely. Phoenix Rouge, Su Yan, and Lin Meng followed behind Ling Xiao, looking a little lonely. Bai Ling was still cultivating in the realm. For this woman who had once lost her cultivation and the right to follow Ling Xiao, nothing was more important than cultivation. She had lost something and regained it, so it was precious. Oh, if there was anything more important, it would be her brother. Rouge, this realm is vast and boundless. Don't you want to go out and explore? Ling Xiao turned to Phoenix Rouge. Although this woman always thought she was the villain, in reality, her luck was much higher than Lin Meng and the others. Me? I'd better not. I'll just stay by your side and help you take care of the realm. Phoenix Rouge shook her head. With her unscrupulous nature, she naturally didn't want to do anything risky. Moreover, with all the women gone, she had the chance to monopolize the young master. That's fine. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, but a cold face gradually became clearer in front of him. Gu Chaoxiai. Although Ling Xiao knew from the first time he saw this woman that her cultivation would be terrifying. But he seemed to have underestimated Gu Chaoxiai's strength. The immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty was the top celestial dynasty in the Azure world. Although it wasn't undying, it controlled countless territories. Gu Chaoxiai ascended the throne at the age of 100 and became an empress. Her name was enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the young master of the Realm Lord's palace. Unparalleled beauty, the first empress of the Azure world. More importantly, in Zhuge Yuntian's memory, this empress was the only obsession of countless young geniuses in the Azure world. The path to immortality was vast. Those under 1,000 years old could be considered a generation. Gu Chaoxiai only used 200 years to enter the Saint Realm. Originally, in everyone's eyes, she was enough to create a new era and become the next empress of the Azure world. But for some unknown reason, in the past year, the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty suddenly changed. This empress was removed from the throne by the Gu clan and confined deep in the palace. Ling Xiao didn't know if this change had anything to do with her divided soul, but if anyone in the Gu clan dared to hurt her, Ling Xiao didn't mind making them disappear from the Azure world. Although Ling people couldn't enter the world now to avoid being schemed against by the Realm Lord, Gu Chaoxiai couldn't be humiliated. When the Ling people's young master ceremony came to an end, Ling Xiao would be completely free of the suspicion of the Sky Demon. It was time to meet this empress. 13th ancestor, bring me to the place where the demon bone is sealed. In the depths of the Ling people's ancestral land, Ling Xiao followed Ling Yuanxing to a tall mountain. This mountain was tens of thousands of feet high. Above them was the Milky Way of the galaxy. There were layers of Taoist rhymes that formed the void and covered heaven's secrets. At the peak of the mountain, a black ancient palace stood quietly, exuding boundless vastness. There seemed to be divine light rippling inside, turning into the most mysterious and ancient, experiencing thousands of reincarnations. Young master, this is the forbidden area of the Ling people. There is a demon bone enshrined here, as well as the great Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth that the Ling people have accumulated over 100,000 years. Ling Yuanxing's eyes were solemn, but there was also a hint of excitement. To them, the Sky Demon was their faith. Ling people used the power of the clan to gather the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth here to nourish the demon bone, hoping that one day, the bone would reappear in heaven and earth. 13th ancestor, do you know how many demon bones there are? Ling Xiao looked up and saw that there seemed to be a spirit spiral that connected heaven and earth, gathering all the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth here. In that spirit spiral, Ling Xiao could see countless divine elephants evolving, dynasties changing, withered trees sprouting, immortals and Buddhas falling, and then being reborn. There was a mysterious fate of life and death flowing in it, making one feel as if they could see the true meaning of reincarnation. 100,000 years of accumulation. Not to mention the demon bone, just the Taoist rhymes of heaven and earth gathered in this palace could be said to be supreme creation. From what I know, Xingzhou has 3 Taoist rhymes of heaven and Xingzhou has 3. Chapter 939. 3 demonic bones are sealed in the Azure Heaven domain? Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes. If that was the case, there should be 6 demonic bones. Once he fused with the 6 demonic bones, his Sky Demon body would enter the 4th refinement realm. That's right. The Ling people have one. According to our investigation, the other one should be sealed in the Daotian Academy and guarded by a 9th heavenly sovereign. The Ling people have spent tens of thousands of years searching for the last one, but we still haven't found any traces of it. Ling Yuanxing sighed. He didn't know what the Sky Demon's remains meant to Ling Xiao. However, the celestial race had sealed it with great means. It was obvious that they were afraid of it. I should know where the last one is. Ling Xiao smiled. 8 Desolation Glazed Pagoda. Since this pagoda was in Yi Qingchan's hands, there must be some shocking secrets in it. When Feng Ling was born, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with his aura. It was obvious that she had seen the demonic bones before. If Ling Zhao's guess was right, there should be a demonic bone sealed in the 9th level of the glazed ancient pagoda. If that was the case, the 6 demonic bones would be completely found. However, the Daotian Academy was a little troublesome. From Zhuge Yuntian's memories, Ling Xiao already knew that although there were countless forces in the Azure Heaven domain, the most powerful forces were in the center of the domain and the most remote areas. The 4 extremes of the Azure Heaven domain were occupied by the demons, ghosts, Buddhas, and Xianyuan. Each had a long history and shocking means. The demon race's bloodline had a long history and lived as long as the heavens. Ghosts were crafty and could control corpses and revive souls. Their divine senses were unparalleled. The Buddhist Holy Land was worshipped by all living beings and flourishing with incense. Xianyuan had barbarians and sacrificial warriors who followed them for generations. They respected the human emperor's heaven-sealing divine technique. In the center of the Azure Heaven domain, there were also a few forces that occupied the heavens and earth. The Daotian Academy was one of them. However, this academy was not attached to the World Lord Palace and did not have any interactions with the Ling people. The Daotian Academy was founded by a supreme master of the human clan, who believed in education without discrimination. He swore that every aspiring disciple of the human clan would have a fair place to cultivate. The master of the academy was respectfully called a saint by the people of the world. He was currently the strongest person in the Azure world apart from the Realm Lord. A 9th-grade heavenly sovereign was invincible in the mortal world. It was said that this saint studied hundreds of classics and collected famous scrolls from all over the world. He was divided into 1 residence and 4 courtyards, and he cultivated Confucianism and Taoism. Even now, every 100 years, this residence master would still appear and preach the Tao. The discussion of the Tao by the saints was also a grand event in the Azure firmament. Of course, no one knew if this grade 9 heavenly sovereign had stepped into the 1st grade Great Emperor realm. However, the Daotian Academy was the holy land in the hearts of all human cultivators in the Azure Sky world. Even the current masters of the top forces might have listened to the sages' preaching when they were young. It could be said that this saint was almost equivalent to the teacher of the entire human race. My lord knows? That couldn't be better. However, I'm afraid that the Daotian Academy will be a little troublesome. This saint has lived for a long time and has a high prestige in the Azure Sky world. He has disciples all over the world. If Ancestor Zhongyu were to take action, he might be able to eliminate him without anyone knowing. However, the few ancestors who have awakened now do not have the ability to do so. Ling Yuanxing sighed softly. Ancestor Zhongyu had killed the heavenly sovereign of the Foliaceae the day before, which had already attracted the attention of many forces. If he were to eliminate this saint, he was afraid that he would put the Ling people in the eye of the storm, which was not in line with the plan of the Ling people. No need. Let's wait a little longer. Ling Xiao shook his head. There were not many people in the Azure Sky world who could eliminate a grade 9 heavenly sovereign. Once Zhongyu took action and killed this famous human clan saint, he was afraid that he would completely fall into the trap of the Realm Lord. Furthermore, Ling Xiao suspected that the Realm Lord of the Azure Sky world might be suspicious of the relationship between the Ling people and the Sky Demon. He just did not have evidence. From the looks of it, the situation that Ling Xiao was facing now was 10,000 times more dangerous than the Xingzhou. Even if he had the Ling people behind him, he could not afford to be careless. The reason why the Ling people were so powerful and respected was that they were a force of the human clan in everyone's eyes. In a sense, they carried the hope of the human clan. At the end of the day, the Realm Lord Palace was a force used by the Immortal Clan to control the Azure Sky world. Apart from the ancient clans who had sided with the Immortal Clan, the Realm Lord Palace was in a hostile relationship with the other forces. However, the Realm Lord was tyrannical. He alone held the immortal demon Ancient Bell and suppressed the myriad star domains. This created the prosperity and stability of the Azure Sky world for nearly 100,000 years. In the end, behind this stability was the forbearance and dormancy of the various human clan forces. The Ling people were now the hope of many human clan forces to resist the Realm Lord Palace and even the Immortal Clan. However, once the news that the Ling people were the descendants of the Demon Clan was leaked, they would immediately become the target of public criticism. Therefore, this chess game could not be rushed. Ling Zhao's eyes were deep. He was already secretly planning how to make the various forces of the Azure Sky world completely vent their dissatisfaction with the Realm Lord Palace. Young Master. Ling Yuanxing looked at the young man in front of him with a thoughtful expression. Although Ling Xiao looked young, his scheming were heaven-defying. Moreover, his current strength was enough to fight against the Saint Realm. It probably wouldn't be long before he had the battle strength of the top of the Azure Sky world. At that time, it would be the opportunity for the Sky Demon Palace to rise again. In fact, Ling Yuanxing had a vague feeling that the Lord in front of him had already thought of a countermeasure to deal with the Realm Lord Palace. "I'll fuse with the demon bone first." Ling Xiao nodded slightly and walked toward the palace in front of him. Only when his figure disappeared did Ling Yuanxing bow and disappear on the spot. Buzz! As Ling Xiao raised his hand and pushed open the door of the ancient stone palace, a golden light suddenly lit up from the void. Endless array patterns revealed the azure sky, revealing an ancient and complicated mystical aura. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear as he stepped into the layers of divine light. Suddenly, strange phenomena appeared before his eyes. Divine mountains stood tall, celestial palaces descended, and ancient seas surged. These various phenomena and changes of epochs gave off an extremely profound feeling of time flowing. It was obvious that this ancient palace at the peak of the mountain had been transformed into an independent space by someone. The array that enveloped this place was the key to devouring the spiritual aura of heaven and earth that 13th ancestor Ling had mentioned. Finally, Ling Xiao stopped in his tracks and looked at a bluestone altar in the center of the palace. On the altar, there was a translucent leg bone quietly standing there. This demon bone was completely different from the remains of the sky demon that Ling Xiao had seen before. Countless strands of divine intent were entwined on it, flowing and twisting, forming the virtual images of ancient gods and demons. They were vast and powerful, but there was no trace of demon intent. Ling Zhao's expression was calm, and there was not much surprise in his eyes. Given Zhongyu's means, since he dared to openly worship this demon bone among the Ling people, he must have enough confidence that the experts of the Azure Sky world would not be able to detect any clues. After 100,000 years of nourishment, this demon bone already had a divine nature, and even a strand of its power was comparable to that of a prime expert. As expected of the supreme sky demon. This is shocking. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, and demon intent seemed to ripple around him, turning into a demonic shadow that stood behind him. The entire ancient palace suddenly bloomed with spiritual aura, covering up the endless demon intent. However, the remains of the sky demon seemed to have sensed something. They suddenly trembled and flew toward Ling Xiao. Chapter 940. Boom! Boundless demonic intent and immortal aura instantly enveloped Ling Zhao's figure. At this moment, he could feel that every inch of his skin had become crystal clear under the nourishment of the immortal aura containing traces of divine intent. And his aura also began to rise the moment the demonic bone entered his body. Boom! Above the ancient palace, a beam of immortal light suddenly shot into the sky, shattering the clouds and reaching the 9 heavens. The void of the entire azure world churned, and countless miraculous scenes began to appear in the thousands of star domains. Countless experts in seclusion walked out of their clans and looked towards the center of the azure world. The sky there had long been covered by divine light. It was golden and dazzling, as if an immortal god had descended to the world, revealing a domineering aura. At the same time, the four poles of the azure world were also emitting multicolored light that rushed into the clouds, faintly resonating with the miraculous scene in the center of the world. Countless spiritual traces appeared one after another, and a wave of spiritual energy that was several times denser than before suddenly swept through the entire azure world. Spiritual energy awakening. An ancient aura awakened from the depths of the mountains, and there was a strong sense of surprise in their eyes. As early as 100,000 years ago, many powerful cultivators had already noticed that the spiritual energy of the azure world was weaker than before. Although this world was vast and boundless, this subtle weakening was not obvious. In fact, due to the passage of time and the gap between generations, many cultivators instinctively thought that the spiritual energy of this world was originally like this. But in reality, as the many ancestors of the Ling people guessed, the pillar that connected to the Realm Lord's palace to the sky was perhaps the immortal race's method of suppressing the destiny of the ordinary realm. The birth of a demon, the chaos of the azure world has finally begun. Many ancient and terrifying auras stood at the peak of the sky, looking towards the center of the azure world and the four poles. Everyone knew that the sects and ancient clans that could stand at the center of this world were definitely the top forces in this world. And unlike ordinary worlds, there were four equally terrifying forces in the azure world. Even the Realm Lord back then could not completely tame them. But although these four forces did not submit, they had to restrain themselves and hide in remote areas of this world. Yet now, along with divine radiance rising from the four extremes, everyone knew that the azure sky boundary would probably fall into extreme chaos for the next 100 years. When geniuses were born, they had to fight for hegemony. Since the Realm Master had gone missing, the sects that had been suppressed in the desolate wasteland would definitely take this opportunity to reclaim their territories. Of course, although Brahma Holy Land was in the far west, it wasn't suppressed by the Realm Lord. Rather, it was willing to hide from the world and avoid karma. However, this was not the case for the Ghost, Demon, and Xianyuan clans. However, what was slightly strange was that the divine light in the center of the azure sky did not come from the Realm Lord's palace. Instead, it came from the Taigu Ling people. The divine splendor didn't decline for 7 days, immortal multicolored light extending for millions and millions of li golden mists descended from the sky, surging with great momentum. In the end, everyone only saw 5 heaven-reaching divine lights illuminating the heaven and earth. They were located in the north, south, east, west, and the center respectively. They complemented each other from a distance, as if they were illuminating the arrival of a great era. During these 7 days, Ling Yuanxing had already sent out invitations according to Ling Zhao's instructions, inviting the top forces in the center of the azure sky to come and observe the ceremony. Originally, many forces were very curious about the Taigu Ling people. In other words, in the past hundreds of thousands of years, there were very few people who were fortunate enough to step into the territory of the Ling people. However, now that the young master of the Ling people had appeared, it gave everyone a chance to take a peek at the mysteries of this race. It was even said that the young master of the Realm Lord's palace had already stepped out of the palace uninvited and headed towards the deity battle domain. For a time, the entire azure sky world was in an uproar. Countless powerful spiritual auras streaked across the sky and descended on the deity battle domain. It could be said that the appearance of the young master of the Ling people was far more sensational than the Tao Heaven Sage's lecture. After all, the Tao Heaven Sage's lecture was only attended by the younger generation of the azure sky world. Occasionally, some ancient existences would descend, but they were only trying to determine their own Tao hearts and find opportunities to break through from the Tao discussions of others. However, in these 7 days, all those who descended on the deity battle domain were famous figures in the azure sky world. To be invited by the Ling people to attend the ceremony in the deity battle domain was a kind of honor for many forces. Therefore, apart from the young master of the Realm Lord's palace, Xuexian, all the other forces had sent their clan masters and patriarchs to show their respect. In front of the main hall of the Ling people's palace, Ling Tsangming stood with his hands behind his back as he looked at the divine light falling from the sky. Behind him, the 9 elders of the main branch stood side by side. Behind them were the many elders and branch masters of the Ling people's branch families. Around the main hall, 3,000 black demon guards stood in formation, holding long halberds in their hands. They were like statues guarding the faith in their hearts. To put it bluntly, just these Ling people powerhouses in front of the hall were enough to destroy almost 90% of the forces in the azure sky world. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg of the Ling people. Ha ha ha, I didn't think that the Daotian Academy would be fortunate enough to participate in the grand event of the Ling people. It is truly an honor. In the air, an aged and heroic laughter rang out. A majestic silhouette descended from the heavens, landing on the ground with a single step. Around him, tens of thousands of spiritual light bloomed. It was like a sun, blinding everyone's eyes. The current master of the puppet house of the Daotian Academy, Hong Guji, was a 7th-level saint. Although this person had a rough appearance and a bold and unrestrained personality, what truly caused the azure world to fear was not his cultivation of the saint realm, but his achievements in the Tao of puppetry. It was said that Hong Guji was born in a prosperous clan in the azure sky world, but he was born of a concubine and was ridiculed by everyone. When he was 18 years old, he suddenly displayed unparalleled talent in puppetry and refined all 108 members of his clan into puppets. Since then, his name had spread throughout the world. He had been in the azure sky world for 900 years and dared to call himself a master. He had fought with countless powerhouses. Although he had lost, he had never suffered a great defeat. Until he met the master of the Daotian Academy, he was shocked by the great wish of the human saint. After that, he joined the academy and cut off all enmity. He became the master of the puppet house, one of the 4 academies. Now, the puppet house had disciples all over the world. Most of them were famous for their exquisite puppetry technique. Especially the first disciple of the puppet house, Wenren Zhiga, who had inherited Hong Guji's talent in puppetry. He became a saint at 200 years old and comprehended the great Tao of puppetry. With a thought, he could make all living things into puppet. He was a famous genius in the azure sky world. At this moment, a black-robed young man stood quietly behind Hong Guji. His face was pale and gloomy. If he hadn't been famous in the world, he would have been killed as an evil cultivator. The Taigu Ling people were the most mysterious and powerful ancient clan in the azure sky world. This clan had never appeared in the world, but a young master had appeared in this chaotic world. No one would believe that this clan didn't have the ambition to rule the world. However, because of the Ling people's special status, they wouldn't do much at this juncture. And this young master was probably shouldering all the hopes of the Ling people. However, just what kind of talent did the Ling people think so highly of him that they would announce to the world and welcome him with such a grand ceremony? So it's Academy Master Hong. The Ling people are honored to have Academy Master Hong here. Ling Tsangming's expression was calm. Although his tone was polite, there was no respect on his face. Chapter 941. Ha 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 ha. Lord of the Ling people, you are too courteous. In order to welcome young Master Ling, I have personally selected a supreme ability as a congratulatory gift. I hope you will accept it. Hong Guji laughed heartily. He waved his hand, an array of golden light landed in Ling Tsangming's hand. "You are too courteous. President Hong, please." Ling Tsangming smiled faintly as several figures approached from the distant horizon. However, at this moment, all the spectating powerhouses were shocked as they looked at the dozen supreme beings and sage elders in front of the hall. Everyone in the azure sky world knew of Ling Tsangming's strength. However, this lord of the Ling people was only the ruler of the Ling people on the surface. The true foundation of the Ling people was the patriarchs who had not appeared for a long time. Someone had done a detailed investigation on the number of Ling people's patriarchs. It was said that there were at least 5 patriarchs in this clan, and their cultivations were all above Ling Tsangming's. In other words, the Ling people had 5 heavenly sovereigns. What kind of terrifying foundation was this? To give a simple example, although the Foliaceae had declined, they were still a famous ancient clan in the azure sky world. However, this clan had only had one heavenly sovereign patriarch, who had unfortunately died under the Ling people's ancient order a few days ago. To be able to kill a heavenly sovereign from hundreds of millions of miles away, even if it was just a first-grade heavenly sovereign, the strength of this Ling people powerhouse had probably reached the peak and surpassed the heavenly sovereign level. In this great world, the great emperor was the pinnacle of the human race. It could even be said that every great emperor in this world was the true fortune of the human race. Even though the Daotian Academy was famous and had 1 billion disciples, the lord of this academy was still a heavenly sovereign and had yet to take the final step. Of course, even if he was a 9th-grade heavenly sovereign, no one in the azure sky world would dare to underestimate this human race saint. The cultivation techniques that he cultivated were really heterogeneous, and his understanding of the Tao was not something that ordinary people could compare to. However, from this, it could be seen that Ling people had a strong foundation. The Grand Elder of the profound Hong immortal sect, He Yunli, has arrived. Qin Hiji, the chief of the Cranecry Mansion, has arrived. The 4 protectors of the great Sun God sect have arrived. Ling people's earth-shattering names were shouted out by the elders in charge of welcoming guests. Soon, countless powerful experts from ancient orthodoxies had gathered in front of the Ling people's temple. The young lord of the Realm Lord Palace, Xue Shiyan, has arrived. Until a handsome figure in white suddenly appeared between heaven and earth. The originally noisy square of the divine temple suddenly became dead silent. All the sect leaders, elders, and successors raised their heads and looked at the young man who was slowly walking over. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. In the entire azure sky realm, everyone knew about the relationship between the Realm Lord Palace and the Taigu Ling people. These 2 great forces seemed to be in harmony at the center of the azure sky continent. However, only those who truly controlled the world and the leaders of countless forces in the star regions under their command understood that this harmony was more like a compromise. How could they allow others to sleep peacefully beside their bed? The reason why the Realm Lord Palace was willing to give up half of the land in the center of the azure sky realm to the Ling people was most likely because they had no other choice. Otherwise, look at the Xianyuan Emperor clan and the Ghost Demon clan. Even if they had many powerful experts and a strong foundation, weren't they still driven to the desolate land of the 4 extremes by the Realm Lord? However, today the young master of the Ling people had appeared. What was the young master of the Realm Lord Palace's intention for coming here? Moreover, it was rumored that this young master controlled the supreme weapon of the Realm Lord Palace. Wasn't he afraid that the Ling people would be tempted by his wealth and make him stay in the Ling people forever? The supreme weapon played an important role in the Realm Lord's ability to suppress the azure sky realm. Now that he had been missing for more than 200 years, regardless of whether he had died or not, if the Ling people could seize this opportunity to snatch the supreme weapon away, the azure sky realm would definitely change owners. Above the azure sky realm, Xue Xian was dressed in white. His aura was ethereal, and there was an indescribable charm about him. In particular, His almost perfect celestial appearance caused many of the female successors of the ancient sects to feel ashamed of their inferiority. That pair of black starry eyes seemed to contain the aura of the entire world. They were deep and indifferent. He stood above everyone. Even though he was only 300 years old, he made many supremes who had lived for countless years feel an inexplicable pressure. If it weren't for the fact that the young master of the Realm Lord Palace had appeared long ago, many people would have thought that he was the Azure Sky Realm Lord. A young emperor who looked down on the world. Young Master Shui. What a rare guest. Ling Songming's eyes narrowed, and his expression darkened when he saw the white-robed figure standing behind Shui Xian. The Realm Lord Palace had stood at the Azure Sky Realm for hundreds of thousands of years, not only because of the Azure Sky Realm Lord's supreme cultivation, but also because of the immortal demon Ancient Bell. The 7 palace masters under the Realm Lord also contributed greatly to this. The person in front of them was the Palace Lord of the Starfall Palace, Lu Xinghe. It was rumored that this person cultivated the divine power of the stars, and was the only palace lord who had appeared among the 7 palace lords. He was also the Tao protector of the young master of the Realm Lord Palace, Shui Xian. One of the 10 Azure Sky sacred swords, the Star Mark, was in his hands. Ling People's Lord. Shui Xian smiled gently and tilted her head to look at Lu Xinghe, only to see that there seemed to be divine armaments around the latter as he descended from the sky in the form of a sea of stars. A decree floated silently in the sea of stars, and it contained the might to seal the heavens and shake the earth. This heaven-sealing imperial decree is the most precious treasure of the Realm Lord Palace. Treat it as a congratulatory gift for the birth of young Master Shui Xian to the Ling people. Shui Xian's voice was clear, and no emotions could be heard from it. However, a dark look flashed across the eyes of Ling Songming and the other Ling people's experts. The heaven-sealing imperial decree was the symbol of the Realm Lord's status. This decree didn't have any earth-shattering power, but it had an extraordinary meaning. It was a decree that the Realm Lord had to issue before slaughtering thousands of races. In other words, Shui Xian was giving this decree to the Ling people. Although it seemed like she was lowering her stance, there was a hint of compromise. However, this decree symbolized an unparalleled tyrannical power. Now that the Azure Sky continent was in chaos, all the ancient races and sects wanted to fight for hegemony. The Ling people originally wanted to keep a low profile and find a good opportunity. However, Shui Xian's actions today had unknowingly pushed the Ling people to the forefront of this era. The Realm Lord had disappeared, and the Realm Lord Palace's rule was like thin ice after spring. Although it wouldn't melt immediately, it no longer had the power to dominate the world. Therefore, the people that the various factions were more afraid of were the Taigu Ling people. What a scheming eye! Ha ha! What a great gift indeed! Ling Songming smiled, but he was hesitating in his heart about whether he should take this opportunity to leave Shui Xian and Lu Xinghe with the Ling people. Buzz! Just as everyone in front of the palace was pondering, an immortal radiance suddenly appeared in the depths of the Ling people's territory and covered the sky. Tao sounds resounded, and Tao runes appeared in the sky. Auspicious purple clouds rose from the east and turned into the sun, moon, and stars. They contained the power of the ancient heavens and suddenly fell. At this moment, whether it was Shui Xian or those supremes who had lived for tens of thousands of years, their eyes flashed with surprise. Tao manifested in form, and it was the will of the heavens. It seemed that this young master of the Ling people was truly immortal and had the potential to become an emperor. Chapter 942. Ling Xiao was sitting cross-legged in the ancient palace. He was dressed in black. Endless celestial radiance started to bloom around him. There seemed to be divine figures standing tall. Immortals bowed their heads and old Buddhas sat cross-legged. They were chanting scriptures to reform demons. However, when the young man opened his eyes, the celestial and Buddha figures trembled in fear and were about to shatter. A demonic intent flashed in Ling Zhao's eyes. He slowly stood up and walked out of the palace. 7th grade exalted realm, sage realm divine soul, sovereign realm physical body. With Ling Zhao's current strength, even if he were to face a true sage, he would be able to crush him with his physical body. 100,000 years of Taoist rhymes had refined Ling Zhao's physical body to perfection. All kinds of heavenly mystery rules had evolved on their own. It was mysterious. "Welcome back, Lord." However, when he stepped out of the ancient palace, a purple-clothed figure suddenly appeared in the void and stood in front of him. At this moment, Bewitching Butterfly's beautiful face was filled with unconcealed admiration. The emotions flowing in her pair of purple eyes caused Ling Zhao to feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. She had coveted him for more than 100,000 years. If he succeeded, wouldn't it be a battle to the death? "Why are you not teaching your disciples in the ancestral land? What are you doing here?" Ling Zhao raised his eyebrows. There was an indifferent smile on his face. He didn't have any feelings for this demon king. However, it was obvious that this woman's feelings for the sky demon weren't simple. Today is the day of Lord's reappearance. Many experts from various forces in the Azure continent have arrived. As the 9th ancestor of the Ling people, I naturally have to stand behind Lord and let those Orioles cough, let those people with evil intentions know about the foundation of the Ling people. Bewildering Butterfly smiled. However, Ling Zhao shook his head. With a thought, his figure suddenly disappeared. After a while, he reappeared in front of Bewildering Butterfly. Bewildering Butterfly's beautiful eyes narrowed. There was a hint of shock in her eyes. Even with her strength, she was unable to detect how Ling Zhao had concealed his aura and concealed his whereabouts. As expected of Master, even though he was in his youth, he was unparalleled in the world, and his divine might was vast and mighty. "Let's go," Ling Zhao said indifferently as he lifted his feet and walked towards the horizon. At this moment, he could feel that there were countless powerful and ancient auras standing in the direction of the divine palace of the Ling people. Clearly, the entire Azure world was very curious about this young master of the Ling people. However, he did not know how many leaks had gathered in front of the main hall today. When the mystic butterfly and Ling Zhao walked far away, another figure suddenly floated up into appearance before the ancient hall. Ling Zhao looked at the distant horizon with a gentle smile on his face. Then, he stretched out his hand and tore through the void, shooting out of the realm of deities. Buzz, buzz. Ling people stood in front of the divine palace. The spiritual power was vast and mighty, and the heavenly rhythm was at its peak. Endless divine radiance gathered above everyone's heads, and the aura of the great Tao stretched for thousands of miles. The arrival of dozens of earthly sovereigns and saint realm experts was a grand sight that was rarely seen in the past tens of thousands of years. And these people had all come for a young man. The Taigu Ling people were extremely mysterious. The world only knew that the 9 elders of the direct bloodline had all become saints, and the clan leader, Ling Tsangming, was known as the strongest person below the heavenly sovereign level. But now, looking at the countless experts from the Ling clan's branch family standing around the square, whether it was Xue Xian, the young lord of the Realm Lord Hall, or Hong Guji, the master of the Daotian Academy's puppet school, both revealed a solemn expression. What was a foundation? The emergence of monstrous talents meant that the strong would not die. After tens of thousands of years of accumulation, this faction would only become more and more terrifying. But now, the Saint Realm experts in the Azure world, who were strong enough to establish a sect, stood around the main hall like guards. They did not have the right to step onto the divine platform in front of the hall. Buzz! Suddenly, the rhythm of the great Tao surged, and a celestial sound rang out. Suddenly, a surge of heavenly might pressed down from the sky, causing the expressions of the countless experts in front of the hall to change drastically. Buzz! Countless rays of spiritual light rose up, and the void suddenly bloomed with multicolored light. Just as everyone looked up at the sky in horror, they saw a white-robed figure descend from the sky. His magnificence was unparalleled, and his might suppressed all directions. "Greetings, Patriarch Yuanxing." Ling Tsangming and the other Ling people's elders immediately bowed. The sound of people kneeling in unison came from all around the divine hall. Ling Yuanxing. Hearing that, everyone's eyes narrowed, but they understood in their hearts. The patriarch of the Ling people, Ling Yuanxing, was the only heavenly sovereign that the world knew of among the Ling people. With the strength of the people in front of the hall, it was impossible to see his cultivation level. But just the power just now was enough to intimidate the world. "Yes, welcome to my Ling clan. Let's witness the birth of the Ling clan's young master." Ling Yuanxing's expression was indifferent, as if he was a different person in front of Ling Xiao. Wherever his gaze landed, waves of celestial aura gushed out, making people not dare to look directly at him. "Elder Xing, can you feel the strength of this patriarch of the Ling people?" In front of the crowd, Xue Xian frowned slightly, but he was shocked. It was rumored that this patriarch of the Ling people was the youngest of the Ling people. In other words, his cultivation level might also be the weakest. Fifth grade heavenly sovereign. Lu Xinghe's tone was indifferent, and there was not much emotion on his face. Fifth grade. Xue Xian nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a pair of wings suddenly spread out in the sky. In a breath's time, the sky darkened and all light was extinguished. An incomparably domineering supreme aura descended from the sky, shaking everyone's hearts. "Young lord, be careful." Lu Xinghe's eyes narrowed, and his sword intent soared into the sky. He stepped forward and blocked Xue Xian behind him. In the end, the only force that the Realm Lord Hall was truly afraid of in this world was the Ling people. Moreover, according to the young lord's guess, the appearance of the Sky Demon was probably inextricably linked to the Ling people. In this way, if the Ling people wanted to control the Azure world, they would definitely have to attack the Realm Lord Hall. Now that the Realm Lord was missing, the Ling people no longer had anything to worry about. Lu Xinghe did not want Xue Xian to take the risk to come to the Ling people's ancestral land because he was worried that the Ling people would attack this young lord who controlled the lifeline of the Realm Lord Hall. This spiritual aura was enough to threaten Lu Xinghe's life. It was obvious that another patriarch of the Ling people had appeared. Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the endless darkness. Then, just as a chill rose in everyone's heart and spiritual light shone brightly around them, a black-robed figure suddenly appeared in the void thousands of miles away. However, there was no spiritual aura coming from his body. As he stepped forward, green lotuses of the great Tao bloomed in the sky. There was also a trace of gentleness on that fairy-like face, which made the fear in people's hearts suddenly dissipate. It was flawless, clear, and natural. It was like a peerless fairy and also like the boundless deep space. Heaven and earth were silent. Auspicious clouds dispersed the darkness, and immortal light shone for eternity. The elders and clansmen of the Ling people all bowed at this moment, waking up the experts of the immortal sects and ancient clans who had been stunned on the spot. "Welcome, young lord." Chapter 943. Young Master of the Ling People. In front of the temple, countless people's eyes trembled as they looked at the young man in black who was walking down from the sky. At this moment, there was a bright light shining around Ling Zhao's body from time to time. Endless phenomena alternated around his body, and there was a faint charm that was compatible with the heavenly Tao. Everyone was looking at him, and there was no difference between heaven and earth. Especially that gentle immortal face, it made the eyes of many female geniuses of the ancient sex ripple. Their mouths were slightly open, and they had the urge to cry. Even Xue Xian, Wenren Zhiga, and the other true monstrous geniuses of the azure sky world had a strange look in their eyes. Without the identity of the young master of the Ling people, this black-clothed young man would definitely be an outstanding person with his immortal aura. Inexplicably, some people started to look at Shuexian. Originally, they hadn't seen Ling Xiao. This young master of the Realm Lord Palace was the most handsome person in the younger generation of the Azure Sky world. But now, with the appearance of the young master of the Ling people, the two of them were evenly matched in terms of appearance and status. In this chaotic world, there were finally two main characters. In fact, some of the leaders of the forces were already secretly guessing what choice they should make between the Ling clan and the World Lord's palace. This Master Ling Xiao is too handsome, isn't he? Yes, as soon as I see the young master, I have a desire to gallop with him. Buzz! Just as everyone was thinking, another purple-robed figure appeared in the void behind Ling Xiao. His face was like a painting, and his temperament was extremely cold. Especially that pair of purple eyes, which looked down on everyone in front of the temple with an aura that looked down on the world. Greetings, Patriarch Bewitching Butterfly. This time, even Ling Yuanqing, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, bowed and kowtowed. Another patriarch of the Ling people. Even though the crowd still couldn't see through the cultivation of this patriarch of the Ling people, they inexplicably felt a chill in their hearts when they saw Ling Yuanqing's respectful expression. Elder Xing, what is this person's cultivation level? Shuexian's brows furrowed slightly, a grave look finally appearing in his eyes. I can't see through him. Lu Xinghe shook his head slightly, but the young man in front of him was stunned. When even Elder Xing was unable to see through her cultivation, wouldn't it mean that the purple-gowned woman's cultivation was even more frightening than him, the Starfall Hall's hall master? Shuexian's eyes were clear as he looked up at the two figures descending from the sky. At this moment, there was not much surprise on his face. Ling people had lived for 100,000 years, and he had never heard of a young master being born. Now that he had made such a big fuss, it was impossible for him to be a piece of trash. However, what puzzled Shuexian was that his immortal demon Ancient Bell wasn't behaving in the slightest. Of course, before coming here, Shuexian had also thought that regardless of whether or not the young master of the Ling people had appeared at that time was a coincidence, the Ling people had most likely made ample preparations to conceal his identity. However, the immortal devil Ancient Bell rang 9 times. What did this mean? It meant that this young master of the Ling people might not have been in the Azure Sky world before. And now, the Ling people had announced the birth of their young master in such a high-profile manner. In Shuexian's eyes, it was just another deliberate cover-up. No matter how gentle and polite this young man was pretending to be, in Shuexian's eyes, he was an extremely dangerous person. There was even a high possibility that he was the reincarnation of the legendary Sky Demon. While Shuexian was sizing up Ling Xiao, the latter's gaze also finally landed on this young master of the Realm Lord Palace. In the next instant, his eyes narrowed, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became even gentler. 60,000 Providence, 9th grade Exalt Realm, already possessing sage power. There was an extremely mysterious concealment on his body. Even Ling Xiao couldn't see through his divine body Taoist rhyme at first glance. However, 60,000 Providence. For a moment, Ling Xiao really wanted to use the Providence plundering talisman and kill this young master of the Realm Lord Palace on the spot. But just as he was about to do so, he saw a sudden surge of celestial light outside Shuexian's body. Vaguely, there seemed to be a terrifying force that could suppress the universe smashing down with a loud bang, pressing down on Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's face turned serious. Divine runes appeared in his eyes and dispelled that overwhelming force. Only then did he smile brightly at Shuexian. A supreme weapon? It was obvious that the force that could shock Ling Xiao was most likely released by the legendary immortal demon Ancient Bell, the only supreme weapon in the Azure Sky world. Even if Ling Xiao only used his consciousness to protect its owner, He couldn't escape the detection of this treasure. Also, Xue Xian didn't seem to have noticed anything strange about the immortal demon Ancient Bell. It seemed that the celestial opportunity that had concealed his aura was also the power of this bell. At this moment, seeing the smile on Ling Zhao's face, Xue Xian was obviously stunned. Then, he nodded gently with a natural elegance. "Let's begin." The bewitching butterfly descended from the sky and landed in front of the Ling people. Ling Songming glanced at Ling Yuanxing before taking a step forward and shouting, "Today, the 19th generation young master of the Ling people, Ling Xiao, has been born. He is the only one in the 19th generation of the Ling people. Now that the world is in chaos and demons are everywhere, our young master will inherit the will of heaven and earth and the will of the immortal Tao. He will eliminate all demons and return peace to the world." Ling Songming's gaze swept across the crowd. He saw a trace of shock in the eyes of Hong Guji and the other top orthodoxies experts. The only one in the 19th generation? Although Ling Songming didn't say anything threatening at this moment, his words were enough to make all the races in the Azure Sky world fearful. The only one in the 19th generation? In other words, as long as Ling Xiao was killed, the Taigu Ling people's legacy could be said to have been cut off. However, at the same time, the Ling people would no longer have any scruples. Who in the entire Azure Sky world could withstand the wrath of the Ling people? In other words, once this ancient race's legacy was cut off, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be the beginning of the end of the world. Now that Ling Songming had made this secret public, it was a blatant threat. There is only one young master of our race. However, if anyone dares to harm him, there will be no mercy. Good. Such a young man is the hope of the immortal Tao. Now that the Sky Demon had appeared, the Azure Sky world seemed calm and peaceful, but countless ancient existences were already panicking. However, since the Sky Demon had come to the ordinary realm, it might be an opportunity for the human race. At the end of the day, it was the immortals who ruled the world, not the human race. It was the ancient gods who had destroyed the overlords of this world. It had nothing to do with the human race. Even if the Sky Demon returned, it would still be the immortals who wanted revenge. Therefore, countless geniuses from the various ancient races and immortal sects had appeared in the world in an attempt to find a fortuitous opportunity in this chaotic world. In ancient times, there was the Xianyuan who fought the heavens. Now, who knew which young man would become the human emperor who would revive the human race? Cheers rose and fell in front of the main hall. Even Xue Xian clapped his hands lightly, as if he was convinced by the righteousness of the Ling people. However, the more the Ling people acted like this, the more uneasy he felt. According to Ling Songming, the Ling people still didn't plan to conquer the world. Instead, they just sent this Ling people's young master to fight for the world's providence? What exactly was this ancient faction plotting? Chapter 944. Ling people have always been known for their benevolence, righteousness, and fairness. Although the position of young master is expected, there are still many branches who have a chance to fight for it. In front of the temple, Ling Yuanxing suddenly spoke, causing the expressions of many Ling people powerhouses to change. Especially those elders from the branch families, their eyes flickered with a wisp of shock and surprise. According to the 13th ancestor, the position of young master of the Ling people had not been decided yet? Although Ling Xiao was indeed talented, he was still young. The position of young master of the Taigu Ling people was as prestigious as the young master of the World Lord Palace. If a branch descendant could obtain this position, it would be a great fortune for the entire branch. Unknowingly, many of the branch elders' eyes were filled with anticipation. At the same time, many of the spectating powerhouses were also stunned. What did the patriarch of the Ling people mean? Could it be that he wanted to have a fair competition where the winner could obtain the position of young master? Weren't you afraid that a child of destiny from the branch family would come and humiliate the direct descendants? Ling people's branch family members under the age of 500 can challenge anyone. If anyone can defeat Ling Xiao, he will be the young master of the Ling people and enjoy the same honor as the direct descendants, Ling Yuanxing said calmly. Ling Yuanxing said indifferently. He wasn't doing this to make things difficult for Ling Xiao. However, with the strength and status of the direct descendants of the Ling people, if he did not make a promise, the branch descendants would not dare to challenge Ling Xiao's authority, even if they were given 100 guts. Ling Xiao had just ascended to the upper realm. Although he had the Ling people's background, he had not yet won a famous battle. If he wanted everyone in the Azure Realm to know of his prowess as the young master of the Ling people, then, he would have to be given a chance to become famous in one battle. Then, even if Ling Xiao traveled to other regions in the future, no one would dare to look down on him. The branch descendants of the Ling people looked at each other. In the Azure Realm, 1,000 years was a generation, and 10,000 years was a generation. However, no matter how one looked at it, Ling Xiao's age was less than 100 years old. At most, he was in his early 20s. Could it be that the ancestor really intended to give the position of young master to the collateral branch? You only have one chance. After today, whoever dares to question the authority of the Ling people will have their entire family wiped out. Ling Yuanxing's voice was cold and indifferent, containing an unquestionable dominance. Finally, someone from the branch family of the Ling people stepped forward and stood in front of Ling Xiao. I'll do it. It's Ling Fan. Many of the Ling people's collateral family members were delighted, and the countless spectators were filled with anticipation. On one hand, they were extremely curious about Ling Xiao's background. This young master of the Ling people seemed to have appeared out of thin air in the Azure Sky world and was relied upon by the Taigu Ling people. On the other hand, Ling people were mysterious and known to all. And this young master who had suddenly appeared might be the key to uncovering the secrets of Ling people. As for his strength, whether it was the almighty of the sex or the monsters of the Azure Sky world, of course, they all wanted to see it with their own eyes. Ling Fan was the most talented member of the Ling people's collateral family in the past 500 years. He had stepped into the exalted realm at the age of 270, and had become a legend of the Ling people. He was even known by the Azure Sky world. In fact, among the people present, there were a few young masters of large clans and descendants of ancient sects who had fought with him before, but none of them had won. Among them, there was no lack of people with divine bodies who had comprehended the laws of Tao. Master Ling Xiao, Ling Fan boldly wishes to spar with you. Ling Fan's face was resolute, and there seemed to be a divine glow around him. His aura was extremely stable and long. With his second-rank exalted realm cultivation, he could be called a monster in the entire Azure Sky world. Although Ling Xiao's status was noble, in Ling Fan's eyes, he was too young and might not be a match for him. You are no match for me. Ling Xiao shook his head and glanced at the Ling people. He saw that there was no one among the Ling people who had the mandate of heaven. No wonder they were set as villains. However, among the spectators there were a few people who had the mandate of heaven and earth. They looked very interesting. In particular, there were a few young and beautiful women with rosy cheeks and watery eyes. They were most likely good people who had good karma. Young master, Ling Fan gritted his teeth. If Ling Xiao's status was not so noble, he would have scolded him. But what can I do? I just mocked him, and the elders and ancestors will accuse me of being disrespectful and kill me. Do I have to? Let's go together. Who else wants to challenge the position of young master? Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent. However, the words he spoke were filled with an extreme tyrannical air. Since there was no mandate of heaven, who among the branches of the Ling people could be his opponent? Moreover, Ling Xiao had merged with the spiritual aura of heaven and earth that the Ling people had accumulated for 100,000 years. With his current combat strength, even if he did not use the true form of the Sky Demon, he could fight against a saint. If he wanted to kill a bunch of exalted realm and divine emperors, he could kill them with one slash. What? Hearing this, not only the branches of the Ling people, but also Ling Yuanxing and the others were stunned. Only Mi Dai's eyes were shining, and there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. This was the master in her heart, the one who had been domineering since the beginning of time. In front of him, the so-called immortals and gods were just fish on the chopping block. He could kill them with a wave of his hand. Of course, if anyone dared to hurt her master, even if it was just a strand of hair, she would kill 10 generations of their family. My master is precious. How can you mortals hurt him? Young master, come, I don't want to waste time. Ling Xiao put his hands behind his back and looked at the sky in the distance. At this moment, he could feel that there seemed to be several auras rushing towards him. In particular, there was a familiar cold wave of energy that made his face warm. The Foliaceae had arrived. He had asked Yi Qingchan to personally deliver the Foliaceae's immortal treasure. Without his order, Yi Yen and the others would not have dared to come to the divinity battlefield. However, early this morning, Ling Xiao suddenly ordered all the Foliaceae's ancestors, who were not direct descendants of the Foliaceae, to come to the Ling people for an audience. That was why they were late. Otherwise, with the current strength of the Foliaceae, how could they be so lazy and dare to come late to congratulate the young master of the Ling people on his birth? Young master. Sorry. In front of the main hall, a dozen prodigies from the branch families walked up to Ling Xiao one after another. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with a strong desire to fight. It was obvious that although they did not dare to be dissatisfied with Ling Xiao's arrogance, they were still angry in their hearts. And these people were all full of Taoist rhymes and spiritual power. Although they did not have providence, they were all worthy of respect in other orthodoxies. Is there anyone else? Ling Xiao's eyes were calm. The moment he finished speaking, he heard a cold shout from the sky. Yi Qingchan of the Foliaceae greets the young master. Countless ancient sect cultivators frowned slightly and looked up at the green-robed figure descending from the sky. Their eyes flashed with surprise. The Foliaceae was the only force that dared to come late on the birth of the Ling people's young master. But at this moment, when they saw the peerlessly beautiful young lady in green, many people's faces showed a look of realization. 7 days ago, the young master of the Ling people was angry and killed his way to the heavenly wood region for the sake of the Foliaceae's beauty. He killed saints and heavenly venerables. His birth was the focus of everyone's attention. Originally, everyone was still wondering what kind of woman could make the young master of the ancient clan so impulsive and impudent. Now, after seeing Yi Qingchan, they finally understood. What a beautiful fairy-like woman. In particular, the wisp of invisible coldness surrounding this young lady seemed to freeze the world. Not only did it not make people feel alienated, but it also made people want to get close to her and warm her. What kind of coldness could make such a beautiful young lady understand the most bone-chilling coldness in the world? Chapter 945. Qingchan, there's no need for us to be so courteous. Ling Xiao's expression was gentle, giving people the impression that he was a young master who was as pure as jade. Logically speaking, the identity of the Taigu Ling people was enough for Ling Xiao to look down on this world and be arrogant and tyrannical. In fact, the words he said 7 days ago when he challenged all the prodigies from the branch families were still extremely domineering. However, under that domineering aura, there was also a kind of warmth that was difficult to conceal. Lord Ling Xiao, exactly what kind of person are you? At this moment, Many prodigies from the ancient sects and young ladies from the great clans were curious. Originally, they thought that they would be able to uncover Ling Zhao's secrets after witnessing the ceremony today. At the very least, they would be able to learn about his character and preferences. However, inexplicably, at this moment the crowd felt even more confused. Of course, no matter what his character was, if they could have a relationship with him, it would be a supreme fortune for the women of this world and the forces behind them. What's more, what morals? Young Master Ling Xiao has such a beautiful face, how could he have any bad intentions? Young Master. Yi Qingqian pursed her lips and smiled lightly. There was a mischievous look on her face that did not match her temperament. The crowd's expression turned cold. They inexplicably felt that the two people in front of the shrine were a perfect match. With Yi Qingqian's celestial appearance, perhaps only that person from the Gu clan of the Immortal Phoenix clan could compare to her. Humph! The bewitching butterfly's beautiful eyes were sinister as she coldly looked at Yi Qingqian. There seemed to be an invisible force descending from the sky. It was obvious that she was deliberately intimidating her. However, to the bewitching butterfly's surprise, Yi Qingqian clearly felt her hostility. However, there was not the slightest trace of panic or fear on her face. She was as calm as ever. It was as if a heavenly exalted ancestor of the Taigu Ling people was not intimidating at all in her eyes. How was this possible? A mere god emperor dared to act rashly? If it wasn't for the fact that it was afraid of Ling Xiao, the mystic butterfly would have already taken action and killed this demoness who had bewitched its master. Yi Qingqian raised her head and calmly glanced at the bewitching butterfly. Then, she stretched out her jade-like hand and removed the white jade sword box from her shoulder. She handed it over to Ling Xiao with both hands. Young Master, this is the immortal treasure of the Foliaceae family, great sage Futian. Today, I present it to Young Master to congratulate Young Master on your birth. What? It's actually the ancient Futian sword. The entire square instantly fell into a dead silence, followed by bursts of undisguised exclamations. Many people's eyes revealed a wisp of disbelief. Great Saint Futian was a famous saint-grade immortal sword in the Azure Sky realm. It was rumored that this sword belonged to the Immortal Clan and had the power to slay demons. Furthermore, in the ranking of the ancient Azure swords, this sword was ranked at the top, and it suppressed the 7 famous swords of the Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb. Such a sacred object was already the foundation of a sect. Even the powerful Taigu Ling people did not have a supreme weapon. A saint-grade spirit treasure was a supreme treasure in the Azure Sky realm. Although the Foliaceae family was not strong, they were still a vassal of the Immortal Clan. This great Saint Futian was the symbol of their clan and the proof of their status as immortals. But now, Yi Qingqian had come with this sword to congratulate Ling Xiao on his birth? Xue Xian frowned slightly, and her beautiful eyes contained a hint of coldness. Before this, the Foliaceae family had always had a close relationship with the Realm Lord Palace. In the eyes of outsiders, the Foliaceae family was the Realm Lord's alliance. But today, Yi Qingqian dared to take the initiative to present the family's heirloom treasure in front of him. This was tantamount to slapping the Realm Lord Palace's face. What are the Foliaceae planning? Their ancestor was killed, and they actually took the initiative to present a treasure and surrender? The Foliaceae family is indeed a vassal of the Immortal Clan. They have a servile nature in their bones. Look at Yi Qingqian's peerless beauty. I didn't expect her to have such a nature. Is she impatient to get on Master Ling Zhao's bed? Maybe it's already morning? If you have the chance to get on Lord Ling Zhao's bed, will you do it? If I were a man, I'd do it. I advise you, if you want to humiliate Yi Qingqian, then humiliate Yi Qingqian. It's best if you don't bring Master Ling Xiao along. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died later. Be careful with your words. Instantly, there were waves of discussion and exclamations in the square. The gazes of many experts from the ancient sects wandered between the green-robed figure and Ling Xiao. It had to be said that the sight of two people side by side was a visual pleasure for anyone. Immortal couples were nothing more than this. But in terms of status, Yi Qingquan was far from being worthy of this young master of the Ling people. Of course, in terms of status, only Xuexian, the young master of the Realm Lord Palace, dared to say that Ling Xiao was a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, he was a man. Great Saint Fu Tian, what a good name! Ling Xiao's eyes were clear as he reached out to take the sword box. He felt a wisp of extremely cold sword intent move along his arm, as if it wanted to break free. You don't know what's good for you. Ling Xiao snorted coldly. Suddenly, a sword intent rushed into the sky outside his body. Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden sword cry that spread for 30,000 miles. Layers of sword chi and clear light tore through the sky, shocking the 9 heavens. The entire sky above the deity battle domain suddenly shattered like ice crystals. Heaven and earth reversed, and heaven and earth changed. At this moment, many experts who used the sword felt their bodies and minds tremble. Even the swords on their bodies seemed to have the momentum to fly away with the wind. How is this possible? This young master of the Ling people is actually a monstrous swordsman? This sword intent, I'm afraid that even the successor of the Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb can't be better than this, right? As expected of the Taigu Ling people. Speaking of which, this clan has a sword immortal who hasn't appeared in the world for a long time, right? You mean, white-robed immortal? That's right. I wonder if Master Ling Xiao has anything to do with this person? Many people's eyes trembled, as if they had thought of something terrifying. Their gazes towards Ling Xiao became more and more respectful and fearful. Crack. The coldness on Ling Xiao's face only quietly disappeared when a crack suddenly appeared on the 3-foot sword box. Then, he suddenly clenched his fist, and the jade box that contained the ancient sword instantly turned into powder. A rusty ancient bronze sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The ancient sword was 3 feet long, and there seemed to be cloud patterns lingering around the sword. Other than that, there was no trace of carvings. It was simple and mysterious. It was rumored that this sword was the sword of a supreme expert of the Immortal Clan. It was also the divine sword of the Immortal King who submitted to the Foliaceae. During the battle of the Immortal Ancient Era, the 18 ancestors of the Foliaceae were all killed in battle. The Immortal Clan praised the loyalty of the Foliaceae and gave this sword to its master, Yi Luoyan. However, although this sword was a sacred artifact, it contained a domineering aura of the Immortal Clan. It refused to submit to the common people and was even more unwilling to be an item in the hands of a mortal. Therefore, the world only knew that the Foliaceae had a sacred artifact, Futian. However, they had never seen anyone from the Foliaceae carrying this sword. Ling Xiao held the sword with one hand and glanced at the tip of the sword. A hint of admiration flashed in the depths of his eyes. The will in the sword just now was enough to make a Supreme Being expert panic. Unfortunately, he had already perfected his sword Dao and had a divine item like the absolute beginning divine talisman. Therefore, the moment this sword will disturbed his soul, Ling Xiao completely suppressed it with the power of the divine talisman. Now that he had just stepped into the Azure world, he could not use the reincarnation demonic blade casually. This sacred artifact was worthy of him to hold. Looking at the tall figure of the young man in black holding the sword with one hand, many members of the Foliaceae had complicated expressions. To be able to make the Futian immortal sword submit, could this young man really be blessed by the heavens? Chapter 946. Good Sword. Ling Xiao put his hands behind his back and placed the Futian ancient sword behind his back, looking carefree. He stood in front of the palace, his black robe fluttering, as if an immortal emperor had descended and looked down on the mortals. Congratulations on being recognized by the immortal sword. I hope that you will be invincible in the future. Yi Qingquan's voice was sharp and piercing through the 9 heavens. At this moment, both the Supremes and the ordinary disciples felt a chill run down their spines. Unknowingly, everyone's hair stood on end, especially the graceful figure in the green robe in front of the palace. At this moment, she was like a sword, emitting a piercing coldness that made people not dare to look at her directly. Qingquan, you can leave now. Ling Xiao smiled gently, his temperament transcendent. Yes, young master. Yi Qingquan smiled gently, then turned and walked into the crowd. However, at this moment, her gaze swept past Xue Xian lightly. Their eyes met, and a sudden chill filled the air. Yi Qingquan frowned slightly. She was sure that this was the first time she had seen the young master of the Realm Lord Palace. However, for some reason she felt a kind of familiar aura from her. Yi Qingquan. Xue Xian raised her eyebrows slightly, and a mysterious smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. 300 years ago you were sent to the lower realm by the Foliaceae. I heard that you only returned to the Azure continent 7 days ago? What does it have to do with you? Yi Qingquan's tone was cold, and she did not have any concerns because of Xue Xian's identity. Behind her, Yi Yan and the other Foliaceae patriarchs and elders were pale, and cold sweat dripped from their heads. Although they had now joined the Taigu Ling people, the Realm Lord Palace was still like a tall mountain that pressed down on their heads. On the day you returned to the Azure continent, the immortal demon ancient bell rang 9 times. If you had not appeared in the Azure continent before, I would have thought that you were the sky demon. Although Xue Xian was smiling, the coldness in her eyes was not concealed at all. Was it just a coincidence, or did Yi Qingquan have an identity that she did not know? For example, was she an accomplice of the sky demon? Young lord, you must be joking. If you didn't open your mouth, I would have thought that you were a woman. Yi Qingquan suddenly smiled. She turned around and walked to the side, no longer looking at Xue Xian. Interesting. Xue Xian raised his eyebrows slightly, but in front of the temple, Ling Xiao suddenly said in a deep voice, "If you can take a sword strike from me, I'll give up the position of young master." Hearing this, the eyes of the Ling people's collateral descendants suddenly narrowed. Suddenly, a few of them quietly retreated and disappeared into the crowd. The great Saint Futian, even if it was in the hands of an idiot, was still a top-notch saint tool. What was a saint artifact? Other than the supreme weapon in the Realm Lord's palace, the great sage Futian could be said to be the most powerful spiritual treasure in this realm. Needless to say, was Master Ling Xiao an idiot? Back then, the reason why the Azure Realm Lord was unrivaled under the heavens was precisely because he had the immortal devil ancient bell in his hand. But today he slipped away. Are you ready? Ling Xiao turned around and looked at the crowd. Suddenly, he put away the ancient sword in his hand and calmly extended 2 fingers. Seeing this, the young Ling people who had originally retreated quietly moved back, wanting to return to the crowd. But, at this moment, Ling Xiao suddenly extended his fingers and gently slashed at the dozen or so prodigies from the collateral branches. Buzz! Suddenly, the sound of a sword resonated between heaven and earth. Everyone only saw a ray of sword light tearing through the sky, as if the Milky Way was falling from the sky and thousands of stars were falling from the sky. Wherever the river of stars passed, celestial light dazzled and dazzled. Countless strange phenomena appeared one after another. The blue sky collapsed as if it couldn't withstand this sword force at all. Thousands of miles of tribulation lightning covered all directions, as if the end of the world was coming. The prodigies from the collateral branches of the Ling people opened their mouths slightly and looked up at the ray of sword light that could destroy the world. For a moment they were stunned. It was not until Ling Fan shouted that the crowd recovered from their shock. Countless spiritual treasures rose up, covering the sky and bringing with them supreme divine power to meet the sword light. However, Ling Xiao now had the power to kill a martial sage. The young Ling people in front of him were at most 5th-level martial exalted realm. How could they be a match for him? The moment the spiritual lights came into contact with the river of swords, they were instantly annihilated and dissipated. At this moment, Ling Fan and the others finally saw fear in their eyes. What a terrifying sword intent! In front of the temple, the eyes of countless experts trembled. Even Xue Xian was shocked. Although, with his strength, it would not be too difficult for him to withstand this sword intent. How could he not see that Ling Xiao was not using his full strength at all? In fact, if he held the great Saint Fu Tian at this moment, just this sword alone would be enough to be called invincible in the martial exalted realm. Clang! Clang, 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 clang. At this moment, on the square, the ear-piercing sound of a bell suddenly resounded in all directions, instantly waking up the dazed crowd. Everyone was surprised. They turned to look at the golden bell that had uncontrollably manifested above Xue Xian's head. Indescribable fear surged in their eyes. At this moment, a golden bell that was 100 feet long floated quietly in the sky. The bell was illusory, and there seemed to be thousands of Tao inscriptions flickering. The originally gloomy sky was suddenly pierced by a flash of golden light, shocking the 9 heavens. Just the bell shadow alone was enough to overturn the world. Even martial sages such as Mystic Butterfly and Ling Yuanxing felt an inexplicable pressure envelop the world. The sky demon has appeared? Xue Xian stood where he was in a daze. He looked up at the ancient bell shadow, unable to react for a moment. At first, he had a feeling that this young master of the Ling people's identity was inseparable from the sky demon. But now, what was going on? Could it be that he was wrong? It's in the east. Xue Xian stepped out and stood on the ancient bell of the immortal demon. Her beautiful eyes narrowed as she looked at the demonic light in the distant sky. Buzz! At this moment, the sword-light galaxy that was about to fall suddenly stopped 3 feet above Ling Fan and the others' heads and disappeared without a trace. Ling Zhao's figure rose into the sky and stood side by side with Xue Xian. There was a rare trace of seriousness between his brows. The aura of the sky demon? Hearing this, Xue Xian turned to look at the young man beside him and nodded slightly. The sky demon is feared by the 9 heavens. This is no small matter. Young Master Xue, there's no time to lose. Let's go together. Ling Zhao's voice was low. At this moment, there was no trace of panic on his face. Instead, there was a strong fighting spirit. Okay. Xue Xian's eyes trembled slightly. In the end, he didn't hesitate and rushed toward the place where the demonic light was falling. Behind him, Lu Xinghe's figure suddenly disappeared, and Mystic Butterfly also stepped into the sky and stood behind Ling Xiao. Although this former subordinate of the sky demon had some doubts in her eyes, when she saw the faint smile on Ling Zhao's face, Mystic Butterfly suddenly understood. No wonder Ling Xiao was so ostentatious when he came to the upper realm that day. It turned out that he had already thought of a way to escape today. After all, the ancient bell of the immortal demon had sounded 9 times in a row in front of everyone's eyes, and Ling Xiao was right in front of everyone. All suspicions were naturally dispelled. Chapter 947. Everyone, the sky demon is a matter of great importance. Why don't we investigate it together? Ling Xiao stood tall in the void as he looked down at the people from the various orthodoxies and shouted in a deep voice. Since Master Ling Xiao is willing to take the lead, we will not be cowards. Master, you are a righteous man. Countless young sky prides in the crowd shouted in agreement. After all, the successors of the 2 top forces in the Azure world were present. Even if the sky demon was reborn, it would not be as powerful as it was in the past. Otherwise, why would he hide his tracks and act in such a low-key manner? Let's go. Ling Xiao stepped out, his body turning into a graceful swan as he chased after the snow-tied rock. Ling Fan and the others only stumbled and fell to the ground after the crowd had left. Their backs were already drenched in cold sweat. If it wasn't for the immortal devil ancient bell ringing earlier, they would have been killed by the sword radiance. Even the elders from the collateral families had complicated looks in their eyes. As expected, the people from the direct line were all monsters. Now that the world was in chaos, Master Ling Xiao, with his sword immortal talent, would become the true protagonist of this era. Buzz. Heavenly Wood region, ancestral land of the Foliaceae. At this moment, Ling Xiao was in an ancient palace at the peak of the mountain. He was dressed in black and surrounded by a demonic radiance. At his feet there were countless corpses, all dressed in white robes, lying on the ground in disarray. However, the strange thing was that the corpses had long lost their vitality, but there was no smell of blood in the palace. In the middle of the ancient palace, 2 jade-white stone coffins were placed quietly. Yi Shanhe, the master of the Foliaceae, and the heavenly supreme patriarch of the Foliaceae, were placed in the coffins. Now, the people from the Foliaceae guarding the coffins in the palace were all from the direct line. This saved Ling Xiao a lot of trouble. Master, Ghost Shadow, Mount Ray Urian, and the others appeared from the void and bowed to Ling Xiao. The direct descendants of the Foliaceae are all here. Yes. Ling Xiao gently nodded. The moment he knew about the immortal demon Ancient Bell, he had already thought of a way to get rid of suspicion. Moreover, when the patriarch of the Foliaceae died, just a drop of his blood contained enough power to destroy the world. To Ling Xiao, his body could be considered a supreme treasure. Of course, the Ghost Clan's classic, the Yama Sutra, was a divine soul art that could be used to control the undead zombies. However, this physical body had lost its soul and contained the might of the heavens. If it could be refined into a puppet, why do you think the Daotian Academy sent the master of the puppet school and the most talented disciple? Of course, it was the Ling clan who invited Hong Guji and Wenren. Master, according to your instructions, we have erased all traces of our auras. Ghost Shadow's voice was hoarse. Now, the strongest direct descendant of the Foliaceae was only a second-grade saint. For Ghost Shadow and the others, they could kill him with a wave of their hand. However, if someone sensed the aura of this 8th-grade earthly sovereign, they would definitely think that the sky demon had matured and would be on guard. What Ling Xiao had to do was to pretend that the sky demon was weak and that all the geniuses of the various clans could fight him to increase their courage to kill him. That demonic will that soared into the sky was the heavenly demon's helpless action. Look, I did kill a saint, but I also exposed my trump card. This way, Ling Xiao would have more opportunities to reap the benefits of the heavens in the dark. Therefore, the Ling people's previous actions were not meticulous enough. Although the Ling people's experts had slaughtered Guanhai City and attracted the attention of countless people in the Azure Sky world, Ling Xiao's future actions were greatly shackled. If all the geniuses of the various clans went out to train with a paragon protecting them, how could he conquer their world? Yes. Ling Xiao waved his hand and put the bodies of the patriarch of the Foliaceae and Yi Shanhe into the interspatial ring. He looked up at the sky in the distance. The demonic aura spread out and guided everyone in a direction. Otherwise, if he deliberately hid his whereabouts, even if the immortal demon Ancient Bell could detect the sky demon's aura, it would not be able to find his location. Next was the first good show he had prepared for the ancient celestial sex in the Azure Sky world. The entire Divine Mountain was quiet and peaceful. Many disciples of the Foliaceae walked in the mountains, laughing and playing. They did not notice the figure standing in front of the ancient palace at the peak of the mountain with his hands behind his back. They did not even see the demonic aura hidden in the sky. With Ghost Shadow's strength, he could come and go as he pleased in the Foliaceae. Moreover, no one would have thought that someone would dare to kill in the ancestral hall of the Foliaceae. Now that the direct descendants of the Foliaceae were all dead, Yi Qingquan should be able to secure the position of the young master with her talent. This way, the clan would be completely under Ling Xiao's control. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone without any effort. Buzz! Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the sky in the distance. Then, people could be seen flying over from the sky. Ling Xiao smiled gently and turned to walk into the distance. Whoosh whoosh. The moment he disappeared, Xue Xian, Ling Xiao's Taoist body, and a group of ancient sect elites descended from the sky and landed directly on the peak of the divine mountain of the Foliaceae. Of course, in the past, even if the Foliaceae had declined, no one would dare to be so reckless. But now, with the support of young Master Xue and young Master Ling, who would dare to be impudent in front of them? What a strong demonic aura! Xue Xian frowned slightly and looked up at the ancient hall in front of him. Meanwhile, the Foliaceae patriarchs looked gloomy and fearful. Why did the Sky Demon come to their Foliaceae's ancestral land all of a sudden? Moreover, there was no trace of blood in the mountain. If no Foliaceae died today, didn't that mean that the Sky Demon and the Foliaceae were in cahoots? Hiss, hiss, hiss. Only Yi Qingquan stood quietly behind Ling Xiao. She was dressed in a green robe and looked indifferent. In this world, there was only one Sky Demon, and that was the young master in front of her. And judging from the young master's expression, all of this was probably arranged by him. Let's go. Let's go in and take a look. Ling Xiao took the lead and walked towards the hall in front of him. Behind him, the ancient race prodigies looked at each other and finally gritted their teeth and followed closely behind. The Sky Demon was a taboo in the 9 heavens. It could be said that except for Ling Xiao, Yi Qingquan, and the Ling people's powerful cultivators, even Xue Xian had a serious look on his face. What else can I say? Lord Ling Xiao is super brave. Boom! Ling Xiao kicked open the stone door of the ancient hall. A wisp of demonic aura circulated and dissipated, but the faces of the ancient race prodigies suddenly turned pale. Inside the ancient hall, corpses were everywhere, but there was no trace of blood. Such a method could be called evil, and it was in line with the way demons did things. Phew! But seeing this, the Foliaceae patriarchs all heaved a sigh of relief. Young master, are you sure that the Sky Demon's aura is here? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at the corpses on the ground. He sighed softly. As expected of the Sky Demon, his methods are indeed evil. I can't be wrong. Xue Xian's tone was indifferent. He walked in front of the jade coffin in the hall. He took away the corpses in the coffin. This doesn't seem to make sense. Ling Xiao shook his head and turned to look at Yi Yan and the others behind him. Who is in this ancient hall? Chapter 948. Master Ling Xiao, this is the ancestral hall of the Foliaceae. We worship the ancestors of the Foliaceae. A few days ago, you killed our clan leader and ancestors. Their lineage has been keeping vigil in this hall. Yi Yan bowed and replied with a trembling voice. His heart was already in his throat. Whether it was the Realm Lord's Hall or the Taigu Ling people, if they believed that the Sky Demon had something to do with the Foliaceae, this vassal of the Immortal Clan would be completely annihilated. How tragic! Back in the day, the 18 ancestors of the Foliaceae were all amazing talent. They had followed the Immortal Clan across the world and dominated billions of galaxies. Originally, all the members of the Foliaceae had thought that once the Immortal Clan unified the 9 heavens, the Foliaceae would skyrocket and establish a foundation for eternity. Who would have thought that all 18 ancestors would die in battle? Even Ancestor Yi Luoyun would willingly descend to the lower realm to guard the desolate wilderness? The vassal of the Immortal Clan had fallen to such a state. Indeed, those who were not of the Immortal Clan had different intentions. Even if the Foliaceae were loyal to the heavens, they were still worthless in the eyes of the Immortal Clan. Oh, or rather, since all 18 ancestors of the Foliaceae had died in battle, this clan had completely lost its value. In the end, strength was the foundation of all interests. What's the strongest cultivation in this group? Ling Zhao's expression was calm. However, Xue Xian seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Second stage Sage Realm. Second stage Sage Realm? Ling Zhao's eyes flickered with a wisp of coldness. If I remember correctly, 7 days ago, the heavenly demon appeared and annihilated several supreme beings in Seagate City. Today, it actually exposed its whereabouts when dealing with a saint stage cultivator? Is this reasonable? This? Many prodigies from the ancient sects and clans had a change of expression when they heard this. Even Hong Guji and the other stage experts had a puzzled expression on their faces. Master Ling Xiao was right. If the sky demon really had the strength to kill a great master, then wouldn't he be able to kill a second-grade Saint Realm expert with a wave of his hand? Why would he reveal such a demonic intent? Could it be a trap? Did that demon lure us here on purpose? The Grand Elder of the profound Hong celestial sect furrowed his brows as divine radiance shone from his body. Did he deliberately lure us here to see his masterpiece? Ling Zhao's cold eyes caused the immortal sect elder's face to turn red, and he could only awkwardly smile. What do you think, young Master Ling? Xue Xian turned his head and stared intently at Ling Xiao, as if he wanted to find some weakness in him. The corpse of a heavenly sovereign is a supreme fortune for any demon, so he had no choice but to come. It's just that his strength might not be as terrifying as the world thinks. Ling Zhao's indifferent words caused the confusion on the faces of many experts from the various clans to deepen. Young Master Ling, do you mean the one who destroyed Seagate City back then was not the Sky Demon? Xue Xian was the only one who understood the deeper meaning in Ling Zhao's words. That's right. Ling people sent experts to investigate that day, but they found that the demonic intent was more like a manifestation of a cultivation technique. If the Sky Demon has really grown to such a level, why would he hide his tracks? Ling Xiao nodded slightly, his eyes meeting Xue Xian's. Someone wants to use the Sky Demon to create chaos. Everyone's expression changed, but surprisingly, no one objected. After all, this idea was not just a common one, but all the clans and forces with a strong foundation were waiting for the arrival of chaos. Only then could the human race break free from the control of the immortal clan and regain control of the world. So what do you think we should do now, young Master Ling? Xue Xian's eyes were calm, and she did not show a trace of surprise at Ling Zhao's words. Of course, this is just my guess. After all, the Sky Demon's appearance is the beginning of chaos. I'm afraid no one wants to see this demon take control of the world. The physical body of a heavenly sovereign is very important. Why don't we focus on the foliaceae and search for traces of the Sky Demon? Maybe we can find some clues. Ling Xiao turned to look at the group of experts behind him, his eyes lingering on Hong Guji and Wenren Zhiga. Young Master Ling Xiao is right. Regardless of whether that devil is alone or not, since we've encountered him, we can't just sit by and do nothing. The Xianhong Celestial Sect is willing to listen to the young master's orders. The Foliaceae is willing to listen to the young master's orders. The Sky Tyrant City is willing to listen to the young master's orders. Haha, the Daotian Academy is willing to fight with the young master. Okay, since that's the case, follow my instructions and search 100,000 miles. If you find anything, you can provide support at any time. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently and did not look at Xue Xian again. Using the Foliaceae as the center, he pointed out a direction for each force, while he followed Hong Guji and Wenren Zhiga to the east. When everyone disappeared and only Xue Xian and Lu Xinghe were left in the ancient palace, the young master of the World Lord Palace's face flashed with a hint of seriousness. Elder Xing, do you think it's a coincidence? Young master, you mean? Lu Xinghe frowned, obviously not understanding what Xue Xian meant. The Ling people killed the patriarch of the Foliaceae. Today, this heavenly sovereign's body was taken away by the sky demon. Shuexian looked up and looked in the direction where Ling Xiao had disappeared. Although Ling Xiao was indeed in the clan today, and there was no chance for him to go to the Foliaceae to kill and shift the blame, but there was a hint of a conspiracy. It can't be, right? Young master, I think this Ling Xiao's immortal aura does not have a trace of demonic nature. Today, he has been right under our noses, and did not leave at all. Elder Xing wanted to say something but stopped. Or do you think that the demon is someone else, but it must be related to the Ling people? It's not someone else. Shuexian shook his head slightly. He did not know why, but from the first time he saw Ling Xiao, he felt a little uneasy. However, Shuexian did not know whether this uneasiness was because of his almost monstrous talent in the way of the sword or because there was another side hidden under his gentle appearance. However, if the sky demon was really from the Ling people, then he must be Ling Xiao. This was a kind of intuition. Forget it. Let's do as he said and find traces of the sky demon first. In the end, Shuexian sighed softly and chased in the direction where Ling Xiao had left. Suddenly, the entire heavenly wood region was filled with thousands of streaks of light. Ling Xiao stepped into the void and looked at the two figures at the end of his line of sight. He seemed to be in deep thought. With his current strength, it was not a problem to kill Wenren-Jiga. However, Hong Guji was known to be invincible in the Tao of Puppet. It would be difficult to kill him silently in front of so many people. Shuexian was here, and it was very likely that he would choose the same direction as him. At that time, he would definitely sense something. Moreover, Lu Xinghe, a heavenly supreme, was standing beside him. Therefore, Ling Xiao had to think of a way to lure him away or delay him. Lord, you want to kill Hong Guji? Bewitching Butterfly's figure appeared from the void and stood behind Ling Xiao. Yes. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, but Bewitching Butterfly's face bloomed with a sweet smile. That's easy. Give me a breath's time. Chapter 949. It's not time yet. Ling Xiao shook his head. What he wanted wasn't to kill Hong Guji, but to get rid of the suspicion of the sky demon completely. Whether Hong Guji was dead or alive didn't mean anything to him. From the beginning, Ling Xiao only wanted to control Puppet. Obviously, Wenren-Jiga was more suitable and more valuable. However, the two of them were inseparable. If he wanted to kill Wenren-Jiga, he would have to kill Hong Guji as well. Master, are you worried about the snow-tide rock? After all, Mi Dai was someone from 100,000 years ago. She quickly guessed Ling Xiao's concern. She didn't know what method Ling Xiao used to make the sky demon appear in the Foliaceae's ancestral land. However, it was obvious that the patriarch of the Foliaceae's body had been taken away by her master. Hong Guji was the master of the puppet yard. He was best at making puppets. A heavenly supreme puppet was enough for Ling Xiao to use as his trump card. But, Master, why do you have to do this? Am I not more fun than a puppet? If we make a move now and the snow-tide rock notices something, all our previous efforts will be wasted. Ling Xiao's eyes were deep. He seemed to be thinking. Mi Dai smiled charmingly. That's easy. Master, although the Foliaceae has declined, they are still in charge of dozens of realms. Some realms are already weak. With our strength, we will definitely destroy the realms if we force our way down. However, you are different. As long as, before the mystic butterfly finished speaking, Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly flickered with a wisp of light. I understand. After saying that, he looked at Mi Dai deeply. However, the Demon King lowered her head and smiled shyly. Master, you don't have to thank me. If you want to thank me, please, however. Just as Mi Dai looked up, she saw that the black-robed figure was already far away. She stomped her feet angrily and chased after him. At the border of the heavenly wood region, Hong Guji and Wenren-Jiga stood on top of the mountain and looked around. Right at this moment, in a deep valley in the distant mountains, a black shadow suddenly rushed into the sky. The black shadow was surrounded by demon chi and disappeared in a flash. Hong Guji's expression turned serious. Wenren Zhiga, on the other hand, did not hesitate at all. He turned into a graceful swan and chased after them. The two words, sky demon, were taboo in the 9 heavens. However, if anyone could slay the demon, the heavens and earth would respect that person as a saint. Zhiga! Hong Guji shouted. He didn't dare to waste any more time and strode towards Wenren Zhiga. Hong Guji and Hong Guji chased him all the way until they reached the heavenly wood realm. The black demonic shadow suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Hong Guji and Hong Guji. Then, it stepped into a space tunnel and disappeared into a small realm. According to Yi Qinchan, this realm was the smallest territory controlled by the Foliaceae. Among them, the heavenly Tao could only withstand the might of the venerable realm. If the saint realm stepped in, it would definitely cause this world to collapse. Trying to escape? Wenren Zhiga stepped out and was about to chase after the demonic shadow when Hong Guji stopped him. Zhiga, you can't. Master, that demon. If it really is that demon, even if he's only in the venerable realm, you won't be able to defeat him. Hong Guji frowned. With his strength of the 9th level saint realm, he could easily see the demonic shadow's strength. The aura of the venerable realm didn't have any saint intent. It seemed that Master Ling Zhao's guess was right. The sky demon hadn't matured yet. However, since he could kill a saint realm cultivator, Wenren Zhiga would only be courting death if he chased after him. As a 9th level saint realm cultivator, he was close to the venerable realm. If he surpassed the limit of this small realm, he would be able to kill all the living beings in this realm. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Hong Guji and Wenren Zhiga's eyes trembled. They turned around and saw Ling Xiao, who was dressed in black, descending from the sky. There was a dazzling divine rune between his eyebrows, which contained a wisp of immortality. Young Master Ling. Hong Guji was delighted. He bowed to Ling Xiao and the mystic butterfly. Just now, I saw the headmaster chasing after me in a hurry. Could it be that he found traces of the heavenly demon? That's right. Hong Guji's eyes trembled. He nodded and pointed at the entrance of the small realm. My disciple and I were on our way to the heavenly wood realm when we saw a demonic shadow rushing into the sky. We chased after him and didn't expect him to escape into this small realm. Why didn't you chase after him? Ling Xiao frowned. Hong Guji looked embarrassed. This small realm belongs to the Foliaceae. I don't know what would happen if I entered it. So, you're afraid that you'll explode with this small realm, aren't you? Ling Xiao snorted coldly. The human clan is suppressed and bullied because they have people like you who are overcautious. Even if you have an eternal talent, being so timid will make it difficult for you to reach the great Tao. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao actually didn't hesitate at all to take a step forward and directly flash through the entrance. Butterfly ancestor, guard this place. If I don't return, seal this realm completely. Young master. Mystic Butterfly's beautiful eyes trembled. She nodded. I know. Look, this is our young master, Ling people. Even if there's a sky demon, I'll go. Behind him, Wenren Zhiga's eyes trembled. He didn't say anything in the end. He followed Ling Xiao into the realm entrance. He agreed with Ling Xiao from the bottom of his heart. The path to immortality was full of ups and downs. If one was afraid, how could they reach the peak? In the end, since they were on this path, they should keep going forward. Of course, as the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. The longer the sky demon lived, the more he understood what it meant. The golden age of the primordial age. Hundreds of millions of geniuses fought for the great Tao, but only this demon suppressed the ages with his own power. he broke the heavenly punishment and established the Sky Demon Palace at the top of the 9 heavens. Although he died at the hands of the immortals, his domineering power still intimidated the thousands of worlds. If this demon hadn't appeared, no one would dare to mention the Sky Demon. Buzz! Only after the 2 figures disappeared did 2 figures appear in the distant sky. Shuexian frowned slightly, especially when he saw Hongguji and Bewitching Butterfly. He felt slightly uneasy. You too, young master. Hongguji's face darkened. If he hadn't been taught a lesson by the young master of the Ling people, he would have used his 108 puppets to chop him into minced meat. A youngster who was still wet behind the ears actually dared to speak rudely to him? He's too young. He's hot-blooded, but he doesn't know how precious life is. Where are young Master Ling and Taoist Wenren? Shuexian glanced at the Bewitching Butterfly, only to hear Hongguji say with a bitter smile, "Just now, Zhiga and I discovered the demon's tracks, but he escaped into this small world. Young Master Ling and Zhiga have already entered the upper realm to search for him." Shuexian's beautiful eyes narrowed. With his temperament, if the Sky Demon had really escaped into this realm, he could have destroyed it along with the realm. Why would he go to the lower realm to search for him? Of course, with Shuexian's understanding of these human experts, if he did that, he would be accused of being cruel and merciless. However, compared to the Sky Demon's appearance, what harm was there in killing the mortals of this realm? The human race was so hypocritical. They were afraid of death and loved glory. Elder Xing, you stay here. I'll go down and take a look. Young master, you can't. Lu Xinghe shouted and tried to stop Shuexian. A small realm like this might not even be able to withstand the pressure of a saint, let alone supreme divine power. Similarly, even if the Sky Demon's cultivation wasn't high, Shuexian wouldn't be able to use the immortal demon Ancient Bell. This way, he would have one less thing to rely on. Don't worry, Elder Xing. Shuexian shook his head and disappeared. Chapter 950. Buzz. In the lower world, Ling Xiao and Wenren Zhiga descended from the sky. Seeing the 2 young men standing in the sky with their hands behind their backs, all the living beings in the realm knelt on the ground and trembled. It's indeed a barren realm, Ling Xiao said indifferently as he spread out his soul consciousness and covered the entire realm. He could feel that this realm was even more barren than the Xingzhou continent. The strongest overlords were only divine kings. Sensing the overwhelming power of Ling Xiao's soul sense, several figures rose into the air from the distant forest and began to walk towards him. Greetings, exalted God. May I know why you are here? The leader of the group was a white-haired elder. He looked very nervous as his lips trembled. It's fine. You don't have to interfere, Ling Xiao said indifferently. Then, he narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, a beam of demonic radiance bloomed in the sky from the depths of the realm, towering over the firmament. Found it. Ling Xiao and Wenren Zhiga looked at each other. Then, Wenren Zhiga suddenly reached out and stopped Ling Xiao. Young master is righteous, Zhiga admires you. In this battle, Zhiga will be young master's vanguard and test this devil. The chosen one is in awe of the demon and has shown signs of death. Congratulations, host, 4 plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. Hearing the voice that he hadn't heard in a long time, Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Okay. He still had 2 luck plunder talismans that he hadn't used yet. If he was lucky today, they might come in handy. Buzz. Seeing Ling Xiao nod, Wenren Zhiga didn't hesitate anymore. He stepped forward and black shadows appeared behind him. A ghastly and vast spiritual might rippled through the sky, shattering the void and obliterating the Tao laws. On the other hand, the experts from the lower dimensions that were originally watching the battle from afar were instantly terrified to the point of fleeing in all directions, and they didn't dare stay a moment longer. Wenren Zhiga took a step forward and crossed thousands of miles of space, appearing directly in front of the demonic shadow. Then, Ling Xiao waved his hand and the puppets behind him suddenly exploded with a shocking fighting spirit. They held the spiritual treasures in their hands and rushed towards Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao didn't know much about the Tao of puppetry. However, given Wenren Zhiga's cultivation, the puppets that he refined were mostly at the honorable realm. Hence, they posed no threat to Ling Xiao at all. Buzz. In Ling Xiao's hand, the demonic saber was held horizontally. Demonic will lingered on the saber, making it impossible to see the blade clearly. One could only vaguely see a bloody line running through it, revealing endless evil. Then, as Ling Xiao slashed down, the originally aggressive puppet was instantly cut in half and fell to the ground. Wenren Zhiga narrowed his eyes and changed his hand seals. The puppets suddenly dispersed and attacked Ling Xiao from all directions. "Humph, you overestimate yourself," Ling Xiao snorted. His voice was low and hoarse. He slashed again with the ancient saber in his hand, but this time, he didn't attack the puppets. Instead, he attacked Wenren Zhiga directly. Buzz! The sky darkened and the entire region started to tremble and collapse. Countless creatures ran away in panic. It was chaos. Wenren Zhiga's eyes trembled. He seemed to feel that a force of the world had trapped him and he couldn't move for a moment. At the critical moment, a hand suddenly grabbed him from his shoulder and pulled him behind it. The ancient sword in his hand collided with the demonic blade with a loud bang. Boom! Powerful energy surged in the sky. Demonic clouds covered thousands of miles and covered the sky. Terrifying cracks extended from the bottom of the region. The creatures who were only at the level of divine kings and divine overlords were directly shattered by the remaining power of the attack. Poof! Ling Xiao's feet trembled. He suddenly flew back and landed in front of Wenren Zhiga. His aura was inexplicably weak. At this moment, he could feel that there was an aura above his head that had already descended but hadn't appeared. It was obvious that even now, the young lord of the World Lord Palace still didn't completely trust him. Wenren Zhiga had to die today, but he couldn't die too deliberately. He had to try his best to save him. After all, even Ling Xiao wasn't confident that he could kill the young lord of the World Lord Palace who had a supreme weapon. 60,000 Kismet was already beyond terrifying. Among the destined ones that Ling Xiao had seen, even Ling Tian couldn't be compared to Xue Xianyan. Such a person couldn't die so easily. "Young lord, how are you?" Wenren Zhiga controlled the puppets and stopped the demonic shadow that was about to pounce on the two. However, Ling Xiao only shook his head. His eyes were extremely solemn. "This heavenly demon has such terrifying combat strength. You hold him back. I'll fight him." "Okay." This time, Wenren Zhiga didn't hesitate. If Ling Xiao hadn't appeared in time, that slash would have been enough to kill him. Buzz! Ling Xiao slashed out with his sword, and a monstrous sword intent shot up into the sky. It pierced through the sky like a river of stars, stretching for thousands of miles. However, before the river of sword intent could fall from the sky, the demonic shadow suddenly took a step forward and slashed down with its demonic blade. It actually cut off the river of swords and charged towards Ling Xiao angrily. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. The divine rune between his eyebrows bloomed, and endless rays of light shot out, enveloping and suppressing the demonic aura in the sky demon. The sky demon's figure was finally revealed under the divine light. It looked ferocious. "Wenren Zhiga." "Yes, young lord." Beside him, Wenren Zhiga's eyes narrowed. A long sword suddenly appeared in his hand, and he charged towards the demonic shadow. At the same time, the puppets also waved their spiritual treasures and slashed down. Endless terrifying power surged into the sky, destroying everything. In the sky, 100-meter-long cracks appeared and couldn't be closed. Ling Xiao and the others had actually shattered the realm barrier. However, Just as Wenren-Jiga and the puppets appeared above the heavenly demon's head, the heavenly demon suddenly raised its head and roared. Qi gushed out from its body and vaguely transformed into a heavenly demon's shadow that was 1,000 feet tall. It stepped on the ancient times and shattered the green skies within 10,000 miles. However, Wenren-Jiga couldn't dodge in time. He was slashed by the demonic shadow, and even the sky and earth turned into nothingness. Poof! Ling Zhao's face paled, and the divine light between his eyebrows dimmed. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. For the first time, there was a trace of shock in his eyes. Wenren-Jiga. However, at this time, he still didn't hesitate. He rushed out, and the ancient sword in his hand bloomed with dazzling divine light. Beat! Congratulations to the host for successfully using the Providence Plunder Talisman. Beep! Congratulations to the host for killing the Chosen One. You have obtained 11,500 Providence points and 115,000 Villain points. Beep! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an additional reward, the Puppet Rules of Tao. Beep! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an additional reward, the Destiny Forging points have increased by 3%. Beep! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a Peerless Tharch weapon, the Jade Divine Armor. Chapter 951. Sky Demon. You deserve to die. The sound of a sword suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. Boundless sword radiance formed a sea, and huge waves shook the sky, covering the area within 100 miles of the demonic figure with the power to crush the heavens. The void within 10,000 miles was instantly shattered, and even Xue Xian retreated 100 feet with a shocked expression. The divine light outside her body shot into the sky, and only then did she resist the remaining power of the sword intent. The stars were destroyed, and the heavenly Tao no longer existed. The sword radiance slashed down from the sky, but the demonic figure only calmly reached out and grabbed at the terrifying sword intent. At that moment, Xue Xian suddenly stepped forward, holding the green sword in her hand. She turned into a graceful swan and instantly pierced through the sky, appearing in front of the demonic figure. Seeing this scene, Ling Zhao's face that was covered by demonic intent didn't show the slightest bit of panic. Instead, a hint of coldness rose. Layers of demonic patterns began to form around his body, and scales suddenly appeared on the demonic figure that stood in the void. Layers of black light suddenly blossomed from his outstretched palm. It was a kind of darkness that annihilated light. It was eerie, pure, and unconsciously made people feel despair. Boom! The sea of swords fell, but it didn't shake the dark light at all. The demonic patterns in Ling Zhao's eyes rippled, and he directly crushed the endless sword intent in his hand. Boom! Boom! The sword radiance scattered and instantly pierced through the realm below. Countless creatures were torn to pieces by the sword aura. Blood mist rose and wails filled the air. It was like purgatory on earth. In the distant sky, Ling Zhao's Tao body trembled, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He had also used all his strength to slash out with the sword just now, and it was mixed with a trace of origin power. Even so, it still couldn't shake the demonic figure at all. Just as the sword radiance rippled and the void shattered, the white-robed, golden-crowned figure holding the green sword stepped through the endless radiance and appeared in front of Ling Zhao's demonic figure. The 3-foot-long clear light contained unstoppable momentum. At that moment, there seemed to be a mortal light rippling outside Xue Xian's body. It shattered the firmament and pierced towards Ling Zhao's heart. Just in time. Ling Zhao's lips curled into a faint smile. His 2 hands turned pitch black at the same time as boundless demonic scales covered them. They were like the hands of a demonic god. One of them held the azure sword while the other pressed towards the snow-tide rock's head. Boom! However, even with the might of Ling Zhao's demon body, even though he had used all of his strength, He was still pierced through by the sword light, causing a mist of blood to rise up. Even so, there was no trace of panic on his face. He had already guessed the strength of the snow-tide crag. If he hadn't forcefully activated the immortal demon Ancient Bell back then, he would have become a saint by now. However, just as his other hand was about to land on Shuexian's head, he saw a smile appear at the corner of the latter's mouth. Then, Ling Xiao was somewhat surprised to see that behind Shuexian, an immortal shadow seemed to have descended from the sky. It was a figure that was coiled by boundless immortal radiance. She wore peerless white clothes, was slender and elegant, and she possessed an indescribable primordial aura. Her face was concealed by the immortal Tao's aura, but it was still difficult to conceal her beauty. The moment the immortal shadow descended, the space instantly collapsed and shattered. Her bare jade-like foot lightly stepped on Ling Xiao's arm. It was like a divine mountain descending, causing the demonic bones to buzz. Boom! Ling Xiao's expression changed. He clenched his hand into a fist and brazenly met the immortal shadow's jade-like foot. Boom! The moment the two collided, the realm's heavenly Tao order was instantly shattered. At the edge of the realm, a black hole began to spread. Wherever it passed, tens of thousands of creatures perished, and mountains and rivers ceased to exist. On the other hand, Ling Xiao borrowed the force of the collision and retreated, disappearing from the spot. At that moment, he could see the illusory image of a bell beginning to appear above the snow-tide crag's head. It was obvious that the Realm Lord's Palace's young master had decided to use his true trump card to completely kill the Sky Demon at the moment when the realm was about to be destroyed. "You want to leave?" Shuetide Crag frowned slightly, a trace of blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. But just as he was about to give chase, he saw the young master of the Ling people suddenly take out a divine cauldron and throw it down. "Come here quickly. I'll take you out of this realm." At that moment, his face was extremely pale. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries in the battle with the Sky Demon. But the anxiety in his eyes made Shuetide Crag's heart tremble inexplicably. Could it be that I've really wronged him? For the first time, Shuetide Crag had a trace of doubt about his own judgment. And in that moment of distraction, the Sky Demon's aura had already disappeared without a trace. Humph! A Supremacy Sky Demon has finally made the Azure Sky world a little more interesting. Shuetide Crag's eyes flashed with immortal light, but the immortal shadow behind him dissipated at that moment. A divine miracle descended from the heavens, blocking the spreading spatial cracks in the sky. Now that the Realm Lord was missing, the Realm Lord's palace was at its weakest. Without the Sky Demon, the human forces would be even more hostile to the Realm Lord's palace. And once the Taigu Ling people had the slightest intention, the Realm Lord's palace would face an unprecedented disaster. But the Sky Demon had appeared, and everyone was in a state of panic. People admired immortals and feared demons. The Sky Demon could destroy the world. As long as it was not eliminated, people would not have the heart to kill immortals. This was the human race's bad habit. Although Shuetide Crag was not a true immortal, he was half an immortal. "Hurry! Come to me!" In the distance, Ling Xiao was dressed in black. The blood stain at the corner of his mouth was glaring. Clear light shot into the sky from his body. In this gloomy land, he was like a lighthouse, illuminating the lives of millions of people in this world. "Young Master Ling, you'd better hurry. I can't hold on for much longer." Shuetide Crag's face was pale. Even though he had the bearing of an immortal, he was still pitifully small in front of the power of the world. In the sky, spatial cracks gradually surged, and the immortal's clear light finally dissipated completely. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of using this opportunity to eliminate Ling Xiao as well. But Ling Xiao had appeared today, and he was the hope of the Taigu Ling people. If he died, the race would have no more worries and would be even more terrifying. Moreover, this young man was foolish and kind, so he had flaws. There was nothing to worry about. Boom! A destructive power several times stronger than before swept over. Ling Zhao's expression turned serious. He suddenly stretched out his hand, which became hundreds of feet long. He lifted the 1,000-foot golden cauldron above his head and flew toward the realm entrance. Let's go! Let's go! Shui-Tide Crag's eyes trembled. He appeared beside Ling Xiao and raised his fair and slender hand. Together with Ling Xiao, he lifted the divine cauldron and rushed out crazily. But at this moment, Ling Xiao no longer had any killing intent. With his current strength and the protection of Shui-Tide Crag's bell, it would be very difficult to truly kill him. In fact, as long as he had the intention to kill, the bell would alert him. This was the first time he had encountered a strong opponent. Boom, boom, boom! Above the void, cracks extended and destroyed the world with lightning speed. The void was pitch black, and only the two figures turned into light. They were like heaven-defying shadows, dazzling and dazzling. However, just as the two of them were about to reach the realm entrance, a void abyss suddenly appeared and completely blocked their path. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. He suddenly clenched his hand, and the great Saint Futian instantly bloomed with endless light and appeared in his hand. What are you doing? Shui-Tide Crag's expression changed, and his eyes were full of vigilance. I'm going to cut this abyss, but I only have 1 breath's time. Then what about you? As soon as he said that, Shui-Tide Crag's expression suddenly froze. For hundreds of years, he had never cared about the life and death of others. Immortals should be emotionless and have no desires. Only then could they be fair to the world. I have my own way. Get ready. Ling Xiao took a deep breath and slashed down with the ancient sword in his hand. A 100-meter-long sword radiance descended from the sky and actually slashed a passageway in the abyss. Shui-Tide Crag's beautiful eyes narrowed. Holding the divine cauldron with one hand, he flashed along the path of the sword light. Boom! In front of him was an extremely dazzling scene. It was so dazzling that he couldn't open his eyes. When Shui-Tide Crag landed and looked back, he saw that the realm entrance had been completely destroyed. He could vaguely see that the world inside had been completely reduced to ashes. Chapter 952. Young Lord, what happened? Lu Xinghe rushed to Shui Xian's side in a panic. Seeing his pale face and the blood at the corner of his mouth, his eyes trembled. At this moment, the realm entrance was already surrounded by the experts of the Azure world. Everyone looked at the 1,000-foot cauldron with confusion in their eyes. Young Lord Shui, where's my young lord? Where's my disciple? What happened? Bewitching Butterfly frowned, but she wasn't as panicked as Hongguji. This was personally arranged by Ling Xiao, and with her master's personality, there shouldn't be any accidents. However, that Wenren Zhiga was most likely dead. However, strangely enough, Shui Xian didn't pay any attention to anyone at this moment, and he just gazed deeply at the shattered entrance to the realm. Until the light and darkness were destroyed, a complicated look of disappointment flashed across his face. He was cold by nature and viewed the common people as burdens. Who would have thought that today, he would see a trace of conscience in a human youth? But, just as the space crack was about to close, a white hand suddenly reached out. Then, a bloodied figure with a weak aura rolled out and fell to the ground. Young Lord! Bewitching Butterfly's eyes narrowed as she stepped out and took Ling Xiao into her arms. Young Lord! Beside him, Yi Qingchan's face also showed a trace of worry as she held Ling Xiao's hand tightly. What's going on? What's going on? Whoosh! Shui Xian's originally cold and indifferent face suddenly relaxed. The Destined One's guard has been lowered. Congratulations to host for plundering 1,000 luck points and 10,000 villain points. Ling Zhao's eyes trembled as a smile appeared on his face. Shui Xian wasn't touched at all when he sacrificed himself to save the world, but now he slightly lowered his guard. This young lord of the realm Lord Hall had a terrifying immortal aura, and the immortal demon Ancient Bell had a divine consciousness. If he wanted to harvest it, he would have to make him lower his guard. He had underestimated the azure firmament will. In particular, Xue Xian was able to suppress the entire azure sky world with her venerable stage cultivation. Whether it was in terms of temperament or strength, the Xingzhou's Tianming could not compare to her. This leek had thorns. I'm fine. Ling Xiao struggled to get up. He staggered a few steps, and blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Young master! There are living creatures in this cauldron. Ling Xiao shook his head and forcefully released the golden cauldron's space. After that, everyone was dumbstruck as they watched numerous figures flee from within. Other than despair in their eyes, there was only endless fear left. However, just as the strange creatures were at a loss, they saw the black-robed figure standing in front of the crowd. In an instant, the fear on their faces completely disappeared. It's the High God who saved the world. Greetings, exalted God. The exalted God is merciful. If you save me, you'll be in the devil's clutches. Supreme God is benevolent. Countless living beings knelt on the ground. Even the beasts and demons that had yet to develop intelligence prostrated themselves as if they were worshipping him. What's going on? When the sky demon appeared, Master Ling Xiao, fellow Taoist Wenren, and I fought him together. In the end, the order of the lower world was shattered. The sky demon was injured and fled. Master Ling Xiao was also injured in order to save the living beings of this world. Xue Xian's voice was cold, but the coldness in her eyes was not as indifferent as before. Hearing Xue Xian's words, the experts from the various sects and ancient clans were shocked and looked at the black-robed figure in awe. Young Master, righteous, in the dead silence of the heavenly wood realm, someone suddenly sighed softly. Then, a wave of cheers suddenly resounded throughout the entire realm. Young Master! Righteous! Cough cough. Ling Xiao raised his hand, indicating for everyone to be quiet. When Ren Zhiga died in the lower world, he will be remembered by the world. Zhiga! Hongguji's body trembled, and he slowly closed his eyes. Even with Ling Zhao's talent, he had narrowly escaped death. He had already predicted Zhiga's fate. However, he did not expect that he would see the true meaning of the path of immortality in a disciple today. He had taught countless puppet Dao prodigies for half his life. Young master, you should go back to the Foliaceae first and recover from your injuries. Yi Qingchan's tone was a bit worried. Ling Xiao just nodded slightly. The sky demon appeared. Everyone, come to the Foliaceae together to discuss countermeasures. Okay. The experts from the Heavenly Wood Ancient clan all looked serious. Clearly, they were also a bit wary of the sky demon. Qingchan, take care of these living beings properly. Young master, don't worry. Hearing that, a hint of admiration appeared in everyone's eyes again. He was seriously injured, but he still cared about these ants from the lower world. Dare I ask all the saints present, how many of them would be willing to risk their lives to save mortals from death under the heavenly demon's destructive power? Originally, the Ling people were no different from the high and mighty realm lord in the eyes of the world. Ling people were even more mysterious than the realm lord's palace. But today, this newly born young master of the Ling people unveiled a corner of the Ling people's mysterious veil for the common people. Righteous, decisive, and fearless. This was what a new emperor of the Ling people should have. Is this the wish power of all living beings that Master talked about? Xue Xian's heart trembled as he looked at the excited and reverent beings of the lower realm, as well as the inexplicable radiance radiating from Ling Zhao's body. He turned around and glanced at the divine pillar that towered into the sky. It really is mysterious. Foliaceae Palace. Xue Xian sat in the main seat. Beside her, Lu Xinghe stood calmly with cold eyes. That means the sky demon hasn't matured yet? Supremacy level cultivation, terrifying combat power. Xue Xian nodded slightly. There was not the slightest hint of fear in her eyes. The primordial sky demon, the primordial true spirit. In Xue Xian's eyes, the taboo of 9 heavens was also mysterious and terrifying. But today, after fighting with the sky demon, he realized that these so-called rumors could sometimes only confuse people's hearts. At the very least, Xue Xian was confident that if the realm hadn't collapsed in the end, or if this battle hadn't happened in the Azure Realm, he could have killed it with the immortal demon Ancient Bell. It seems that the Sky Demon wasn't the one who destroyed Guanhai City back then. The experts of the various forces had solemn looks in their eyes, as they suddenly had many guesses in their hearts. It shouldn't be. At this moment, a gentle and clear voice suddenly came from the back of the palace. Everyone looked up and saw Ling Xiao walk out from the back of the palace. He was dressed in black and looked pale. But at this moment, the blood stains on his body had already vanished, and he was spirited and handsome while emanating an immortal aura. Young master! Many powerful beings stood up and bowed slightly to Ling Xiao. What they were in awe of now was not only Ling Xiao's strength and background, but also his righteousness that dared to sacrifice his life for the common people. Throughout history, those who cared about the common people were all protected by the heavenly Tao. They went against demons and deities all the way and became emperors. Although Ling Xiao was only a supremacy now, his emperor aura was obvious. He would definitely become the supreme leader of the human race in the future. Everyone, there are some things that I don't know if I should say. Ling Xiao smiled gently. His pale face suddenly flashed with a hint of seriousness. Chapter 953. Master Ling Xiao. If you have something to say, please say it. The elders and experts of the various forces frowned slightly as they looked at Ling Xiao with a trace of doubt in their eyes. However, Ling Xiao had proven his doubt today, and many people had already seen him as the hope of the human race. The wariness in their hearts towards the Ling people had unknowingly dissipated. The Sky Demon hasn't matured yet, but how did he grow to this level? Ling Xiao glanced at Xue Xian. In the end, even if the young lord of the Realm Lord Palace had let down his guard against him today, their identities meant that they were destined to be life and death enemies. However, with Xue Xian's methods, immortal opportunity protection, and supreme weapon, even Ling Xiao had to admit that he couldn't kill the young lord of the Realm Lord Palace now. However, Xue Xian had cultivated for more than 200 years, while Ling Xiao had cultivated for less than 20 years. The path to immortality had peaks, so it wasn't lonely. The enemies who lost to me were never worthy of being called opponent. Everyone looked at each other with many doubts in their hearts. The immortal demon Ancient Bell had stood in the sky for more than 100,000 years, but it had never sensed the Sky Demon's aura. However, the Realm Lord had disappeared for 200 years, and the Sky Demon had appeared. His venerate cultivation hadn't matured yet, but compared to the young geniuses of the Azure continent, he was still an abyss. Young Lordling, what do you mean? Xue Xian's eyes were clear and cold. She had regained her initial indifference of being displeased by the heavens and earth and making everyone her enemy. Since he can hide his cultivation level and reach the venerate level, he probably has a way to avoid the detection of the immortal demon Ancient Bell. Now that he has appeared and taken the corpse of the Foliace's ancestor, I'm afraid he's also trying to cultivate. Ling Xiao's tone was indifferent, and he didn't even look at Xue Xian. However, in today's battle, the Sky Demon was injured and fled. Once he hides again, who knows what level he'll be at when he reappears. Young Lord, you mean, since he's at the Exalt Realm, he's merely of the same generation as us. The chaotic times have arrived, and most of the disciples of the various sects have already appeared in the world. Leave the heavy responsibility of slaying devils to us. Ling Xiao's expression was resolute. In truth, he had already guessed Xue Xian's concerns. With the disappearance of the Realm Lord, It was likely that what he wanted right now was not peace and prosperity. One would be tempted by lust after being satiated. These words were also applicable on the path to immortality. Why must the world be divided after being united for a long time? The various forces had been stable for 100,000 years and had long accumulated enough resources. But how many of the world's cultivators were willing to live under others forever? However, the appearance of the sky demon would temporarily disrupt the situation in Azure Heaven and give the Realm Lord Palace more time to breathe. At the very least, in Ling Zhao's opinion, with Xue Xian's talent and providence, he would probably become the new sector lord of the azure skies in another 100 years. At that time, with the immortal devil ancient bell in his hand, he would no longer need to fear any forces. Nowadays, the great rhythm of heaven and earth was in the immortals and not in the demons. Even if the sky demon reincarnated, it was no longer as powerful as it used to be. At this moment, Ling Xiao and Xue Xian's thoughts were completely the same. Therefore, Ling Xiao guessed that he would definitely agree with him. The human heart was indeed complicated. However, when their plans were the same and their interests were the same, it was a competition of who had the foresight, the bigger picture, and the more meticulous planning. Xue Xian's talent was hard to find. Ling Xiao could faintly sense a true immortal aura from him. His background was probably far more complicated than what the world imagined. Today's chess game was close to perfect. Not only did Ling Xiao completely rid himself of the suspicion of the sky demon, but he also created an illusion that the sky demon could be killed. In this way, those children of destiny who had been cultivating in seclusion would surface one by one and be exposed to him. At that time, he would be in the light and also in the dark. Wouldn't he be able to eat any leek he wanted? Of course, there were many ways to eat. Not only do we have to eat our fill, but we also have to eat politely and make others feel grateful. What young Master Ling means. Upon hearing Ling Zhao's words, many powerhouses' expressions changed instantly. In particular, Hong Guji's eyes flashed with anger. Young Master Ling, although I admire your righteousness, this demon's matter is very important. It's not that I don't trust your generation, but wouldn't it be safer for a supreme to kill him? That's right. This demon's methods are terrifying. Even the ancient gods couldn't kill him. I think young Master Ling's words make sense. However, just as the powerhouses were discussing in low voices and looking worried, Xue Xian suddenly spoke from the top of the main hall. Many powerhouses were stunned when they heard that. The Realm Lord's palace and the Taigu Ling people had never been on good terms. It could even be said that they were natural enemies. Why were the successors of these two supreme Taoism factions on the same side, which was rare? Could it be that today's battle had given the two of them a friendship? At this thought, some of the powerhouses felt a chill in their hearts. Whether it was the Realm Lord's palace or the Taigu Ling people, they both had the power to dominate this world. If these two powerhouses joined forces, how were they going to fight for the world's providence? Young Master Ling has made it very clear just now. Since the Sky Demon was able to reach the Supreme Realm, there might be someone secretly supporting him. Xue Xian's gaze swept across the crowd. Now that he's injured and has escaped, if the powerhouses of the Azure world all come out and search for the Sky Demon, he might go into hiding again and not dare to show himself. That's right. Since this is a chaotic world, with the tyrannical nature of the heavenly demons, they might not even place us in their eyes. Perhaps this injury will make them want to become stronger even more. Since the sovereigns have gone into seclusion, the younger generation will fight for the destiny of the world. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. His voice was low and filled with endless battle intent. In every era there will be an emperor who will dominate the world. If we want to achieve true supremacy on the path to immortality, I'm afraid external forces won't do. What do you all think? I agree with young Master Ling. Xue Xian's gaze met with Ling Zhao's. An invisible force spread out from both of them. There could only be one emperor in every era. Although these words were domineering, they were the truth of the immortal path. Even if there were spies of the Sky Demon in this hall, when these words reached the Sky Demon's ears, it would make him dream back 190,000 years. Those who became emperors had always been proud and aloof since ancient times. If they didn't have this ambition, how could they fight against the heavens? This was an open conspiracy and a challenge. Of course, whether it was Xue Xian or Ling Xiao, they all had their own plans. If the Supremes didn't come out, Ling Xiao could kill almost anyone in the Azure world. With this, everything could be carried out smoothly. What Xue Xian needed was nothing more than time. As long as he had enough time to merge with the immortal demon Ancient Bell and recover from his injuries, or wait for the Realm Lord to return, in this world, the Sky Demon or Sky God was just a passing cloud. That's right. The Sky Demon once stood at the top of the world and controlled the 9 heavens. But now, he had returned to the beginning of the immortal path and was just one of the people. I'll give you time to catch up, but in the end you'll all be unable to see my back. Emperor, immortal, what I want is to be the sole ruler of the heavenly Tao. I also think that young master and young master's words make sense. Instead of letting that demon hide behind the scenes, why don't we let the younger generation compete with him? Perhaps it's also a chance for the heavens. In the end, an ancient expert nodded gently, his eyes filled with vicissitudes. The emperors of the human race were already at the peak of the Tao. But it was difficult to change the fate of the world with this. Only the younger generation with the heavenly mandate to kill the Sky Demon and suppress the Realm Lord could continue the prosperity of the human race and maintain their eternal majesty. This step was a game, but it also showed that the human race was in dire straits. Chapter 954. All right, this matter is settled. You can discuss it with your clans after you return. Xue Xian stood up and looked deeply at Ling Xiao. Young Master Ling, farewell. With that, she nodded slightly and walked out of the hall. Although he hadn't been seriously injured in today's battle, using the immortal opportunity had aggravated his old injuries. However, as the young master of the Realm Lord Hall, Xue Xian couldn't expose any flaws, so she hadn't chosen to go into seclusion to recover. Farewell, young master. All the cultivators stood up and bowed. However, the smile on Ling Zhao's face froze at this moment. Xue Xian gave him a very dangerous feeling, even more dangerous than Yi Luoyan. Young Master Ling, we'll return to our clans. Take care, young master. After everyone left the Foliaceae, Mi Dai said coldly, Master, do you want to take this opportunity to leave Xue Xian in the Heavenly Wood Realm? Now, the heavenly demon had appeared in the world and fought a great battle with the snow-tide rock, destroying a small world. Even if he died in the Foliaceae, no one would suspect the Ling people. You can't kill him. With the protection of the immortal demon Ancient Bell and Lu Xinghe, it would be difficult for Mi Dai to kill Xue Xian. Once this matter was exposed, Ling Zhao's previous arrangements would be completely useless. Master, you're looking down on me. Mi Dai looked aggrieved, but Ling Xiao looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. You're going to lead your clansmen back to the clan. Remember to make a big fuss. What about you, Master? I still have things to do. Remember, everyone in the Azure Sky Realm is focused on me, the Ling people. Without my orders, you're not to leave the Realm of Gods to avoid gossip. Ling Zhao's expression was calm. With the Puppet Dao Law in his hands and Wenren Zhige's Puppet Dao Classic, the corpse of the Patriarch of the Foliaceae would soon become his battle force. Ling Zhao's life would not be in danger as long as the true Almighty of the Azure world didn't make a move against him with a heavenly sovereign puppet, a domain, and a substitute puppet. As such, he could hide behind the scenes and harvest the natural luck. It could be said that nothing would go wrong. Furthermore, Demon Venerable Zhong Yu had once said that the Sector Lord was definitely still alive. He had to think of a way to find this person, only then would he know the true scheme of the Realm Lord Hall. But, Ling Zhao's eyes were cold, and Mystic Butterfly immediately swallowed the complaints that were about to come out of her mouth. I'll just leave. Master, keep this soul jade well. One of my incarnations is in it. Mi Dai reluctantly handed over a soul jade to Ling Xiao, and then led the Ling people out of the hall. What's the matter? When Mystic Butterfly and the others were far away, Ling Xiao took out a voice transmission talisman and asked in a low voice. Master, I've found out Miss Gu's whereabouts. Folded Shadow's voice was a little hesitant, and Ling Xiao's eyes flashed, but his voice was still cold. Where is she? Miss Gu is the immortal Phoenix Sovereign Lord. I don't know what happened, but she angered our clan and was sealed in the immortal Phoenix Temple. Moreover, speak. Killing intent flashed in Ling Zhao's eyes. Although the immortal Phoenix Gu clan was a big clan in the Azure world, it was far from the Xianhong Immortal Sect, Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb, and Daotian Academy. The Gu clan seems to be in trouble. They said that they want to marry Miss Gu to the Crown Prince of the Divine Spirit Celestial Dynasty. Boom! Suddenly, thunderclouds appeared on the sacred mountain of the Foliaceae, but they disappeared in an instant. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed, and then he took a deep breath. Master? After a long silence, Ling Xiao said calmly, I know. Go and find out what kind of trouble the Gu clan is in. Yes. Ling Xiao frowned. With Gu Chaoxiai's cultivation and talent, she was one of the best in the Azure world. She should be on par with Xue Xianyan. Such a monstrous person should be the fortune of the clan. Why was the Gu clan willing to abandon her and marry her to another dynasty? The Divine Spirit Celestial Dynasty? It was said that this celestial dynasty was one of the top clans in the Azure world. Especially the crown prince of this celestial dynasty, he was even more famous. Originally, with Ling Zhao's personality, he had just set up a plan and established a righteous and loyal image. He would not break this image because of his own impulsiveness. However, he really wanted to kill someone. Master, in the Great Hall, Yi Qingchan frowned and sighed. She looked at Ling Zhao's expression, which was sometimes dark and sometimes cold. She knew very well that in the world, only Lady Gu could make Ling Xiao reveal such an expression. Previously, Ling Xiao had asked her about the Gu clan and Gu Chaoxiai. However, when Yi Qingchan came to the lower realm, this Lady Gu had not yet become famous in the Azure world. Therefore, she did not know. She remembered that day in the mountains, dressed in white, like an immortal who had descended from the heavens. Her celestial face was cold and otherworldly. No matter how many women Ling Xiao had by his side, Yi Qingchan did not care. Only Nian Qingyun made her feel uneasy. I am going to the immortal Phoenix Ancient Dynasty. Ling Xiao stood up and walked out of the hall without another word. I will go with you. Yi Qingchan hugged Ling Zhao's arm. Her eyes were sad and filled with anticipation. Ling Zhao's injury this time was not an act. The corrosion of the power of the world was not so easy to resist. Yes. Ling Xiao wanted to refuse, but seeing the stubbornness in Yi Qingchan's eyes, he did not say anything. He was not clear about Gu Chaoxiai's attitude towards him now. And that woman's coldness and arrogance could be seen from the lower realm. If she was willing to marry the crown prince of the Holy Spirit Celestial Dynasty, what would he do? Kill her? Suddenly, Ling Xiao felt an inexplicable annoyance. Let's go. Ling Xiao stepped out, his body turning into a graceful swan as he soared into the clouds. Yi Qingchan seemed to be surrounded by wind and snow. The coldness in her eyes made Ling Xiao feel a bone-piercing chill. Qingchan, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Don't worry, sir. I know my place. Yi Qingchan smiled gently, but her eyes were a deep blue color, demonic and piercingly cold. In the realm, Ling Xiao stood in the Sky Palace with his hands behind his back. At his feet, the bodies of the Foliaceae patriarch and clan leader were quietly placed. Now that he had left the Ling people, he naturally had to have enough power in his hands to stir up the storm in the azure firmament. The two corpses in front of him were his first step in establishing himself in the azure firmament. At a certain moment, thunderclouds suddenly gathered in the realm. Ling Xiao sat down cross-legged. System, add point to the ancient puppet scripture. Boom! The originally complicated and obscure puppet scripture was instantly perfected by Ling Xiao. The two corpses on the ground strangely climbed up at this moment. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.